Chapter 707. After a long while, Tian calmed down a little. Tang Hao, Elder Yi, and the others looked at him strangely, not knowing what was going on. Tian, what are you going to do? Sun Hai, of course, knew what a space-time barrier meant. His face was dark as he asked in a low voice. Tian's mind was spinning rapidly. A space-time barrier was the intersection of two planes. With his current strength, it was impossible to destroy it. Suddenly, an idea appeared in Tian's mind. His eyes trembled, and a strange expression flashed in his eyes. He looked at Sun Hai, but did not speak for a long time. Tian, what are you thinking about? Sun Hai was scared by Tian's stare, and his throat involuntarily moved. Tian's lips curled into a strange smile, and he said, Mr. Sun Hai, I remember that a sealer can also seal a space-time barrier, right? Upon hearing Tian's words, Sun Hai's heart skipped a beat. Then, with a shocked expression, he said, Tian, that's a space-time ward we're talking about. It's a place where two planes meet. I'm only a 7th grade sealer. There's no way I can seal a space-time ward by myself. If that space-time barrier was very small, within a radius of 10 meters, Sun Hai might be able to seal it. But at the intersection of planes, a casual collision would cover a large area of thousands or even tens of thousands of meters. Such a large space-time barrier would require at least dozens of rank 7 sealers working together to seal it. With just Sun Hai alone, it was absolutely impossible. Of course, Tian understood. He smiled faintly and said, Mr. Sun Hai, don't be agitated. I'm not asking you to seal the entire space-time barrier. I'm just asking you to seal the entrance to the 3,000 small worlds from the Shumi world. Sun Hai was slightly stunned and immediately understood something. His expression changed, and he said in astonishment, You want to open a passage that only allows martial artists from the 3,000 small worlds to enter the Shumi world, and not allow martial artists from the Shumi world to enter the 3,000 small worlds, right? Yes. Tian nodded heavily, a faint smile on his face. The space-time enchantment was a fortuitous encounter for the warriors of the 3,000 lesser worlds. It gave them a chance to enter a higher world. Tian, your idea is too... Sun Hai's expression was strange. He couldn't think of a word to describe Tian. Too selfish? Too crazy? Tian shook his head with a smile and said, Mr. Sun Hai, the summer world is so big. It's not a big deal to accept a few warriors from the 3,000 small worlds, right? Sun Hai gulped down a mouthful of saliva and was actually speechless. Well, Mr. Sun Hai is happily decided. As long as you seal the space-time barrier, I will follow you to the Sky Sword Pavilion. Tian laughed with a calm expression. He planned to use the space-time barrier to create a passageway so that the warriors of the 3,000 small worlds could enter the Sumeru world. Of course, after this passage was built, it had to be well controlled. Not everyone had the qualifications to enter the Shumi world. Sun Hai's face was as red as an eggplant. Tang Hao, Elder Yi, and the others listened to them in a daze. They had no idea what Tian and Sun Hai were discussing. Tian stood up and prepared to rest for a while. After Imo Rushi woke up, he would start on the matter of the Yuan Qi vein and the space-time barrier. Boss! At this moment, a rotund figure rushed in. DeBeo, what happened? Tian looked at Jean DeBeo's soulless appearance, and his heart couldn't help but sink. Sun Hai saw a little fatty rush in, and his eyes suddenly narrowed. His gaze instantly became blazing, and his face revealed an expression of unconcealable shock. In an instant, he was like a wolf that saw a little sheep. His gaze was fixed on Jean DeBeo and couldn't move away. Jean DeBeo was completely unaware of it. He quickly came to Tian's side and said while panting heavily, Boss, quickly go and take a look. Ninth sister, something happened. Something happened to Ninth sister. Tian's gaze trembled violently, and he stood up. His figure moved and turned into a stream of light as he rushed out. Tang Hao and the others looked at each other and hurriedly followed. Jean DeBeo panted heavily on the spot. He suddenly raised his head and suddenly saw a pair of blazing eyes staring at him. That gaze seemed to want to swallow him. Jean DeBeo looked at Sun Hai, and his pair of beady eyes spun a few times. He immediately covered his chest and shouted loudly, "You pervert! What do you want?" After shouting, Jean DeBeo ran out like a wisp of smoke. Sun Hai was stunned on the spot and only reacted after a long time. Thinking back to Jean DeBeo's reaction just now, he immediately knew that the latter had misunderstood. At the same time, he felt a chill in his heart, and a layer of goosebumps appeared. "Little fatty, you're a rare sealing master genius that only appears once in 1,000 years. I can't let you go." Sun Hai calmed down, and the corners of his mouth slightly raised as he muttered to himself. Nietian quickly arrived at Nyeuro's room and directly rushed in. Big brother Nietian. Xiao Ling was by Nyeuro's side. When she saw that Nietian had arrived, she actually cried out in grief. Seeing Xiao Ling reaction, Nietian's face darkened. He took a step forward and saw Nyeuro lying on the bed. The scene that entered his eyes made him stunned. Nyeuro was lying flat on the bed. Her little face was rosy, and there was a sweet smile on the corner of her mouth. She did not look like she was in trouble at all. However, the strange thing was that her entire body was surrounded by a layer of seven-colored light. Waves of strange energy were released and filled the entire room. Nietian was stunned for a long time. His face was filled with astonishment. He carefully felt the energy in the space around him. It actually gave him a kind of illusion, as if he was in a dream. A sealed door appeared in front of him. It did not give off any sinister aura, but instead, it was flowing with seven-colored light. It was dazzling and extremely dreamy. In the sealed door, a figure slowly walked out. Slowly, the figure became clearer and clearer. That figure was a peerless beauty. She was surrounded by a pure and holy aura, and her exquisite facial features were extremely beautiful. However, when Nietian saw that face clearly, his entire body shook. A terrifying sword was released, and his face instantly became ferocious. He roared angrily, "Luo Zian!" The face that appeared in front of him was actually Nietian's enemy from his previous life, Luo Zian. Big brother Nietian. Just as Nietian was about to make a move, an anxious voice sounded in his ear. Nietian's mind shook, and the face in front of him turned into Xiao Ling. Big brother Nietian, are you all right? Xiao Ling saw that Nietian was uneasy and asked worriedly. "I'm fine." Nietian became cold, and his mind trembled slightly. The scene in front of him became much more real, but the strange energy in the space was still there. "Linger, I didn't scare you just now, did I?" Nietian comforted Xiao Ling. She shook her head slightly. "It's an illusion." Nietian's eyes narrowed, and his heart was filled with shock. When he used his heart to sense the energy in the space, he actually fell into an illusion. His spiritual power had already reached the 64th level, and yet he was still controlled by an illusion. It was really unbelievable. Chapter 708. Nietian stared at the rainbow-colored light swirling around Nyeuro. His expression grew complicated. The illusion just now had not been very strong. Xiao Ling had only shouted once, and he had come out. But the illusion had been very real. Once trapped, one would not be able to escape without external help. What had happened to Nyeuro? How could she have released such a strange power? "Linger, what's wrong with Ninth Sister?" Nietian asked Xiao Ling. 2 days ago, Ro suddenly said that she was not feeling well. She has been lying in bed ever since. She hasn't woken up since yesterday. I thought she was asleep, so I did not disturb her. But when I came to her room, I saw her like this. Xiao Ling said guiltily, "Big brother Nietian, it's all my fault. I did not take good care of Ro. It's okay. It's not your fault." Nietian comforted Xiao Ling. Then, he looked at Nyeuro again. His divine sense entered Nyeuro's body, but in the next moment, his body shook. A strange power rebounded back at him. His divine sense had been attacked, and he took a few steps back, almost falling. "Big brother Nietian, are you all right?" Xiao Ling went up to support Nietian, not knowing what had happened. "I'm fine." Nietian waved his hand, his frown deepening. The force just now had been so terrifying that even Nye Tion's powerful divine sense had been bounced back. If it had been anyone else, their divine sense would have been severely damaged. Even if they didn't die, they would have gone insane. Nye Yuro's body seemed to have awakened a terrifying power. It was very frightening. Ninth sister, what happened to you? Nye Tion thought hard, his fists clenched. Master. Just then, the corpse lord's voice came from the chaos original coffin. This girl's identity is not simple. She seems to have awakened some terrifying illusion seal. Illusion seal? Nye Tion's eyes narrowed. He suddenly remembered that he had seen the spirit illusion seal on Queen Medusa. Its aura was similar to the power in the air. Yes. Corpse Demon Monarch nodded and said with a frown, this little girl's Yuan spirit is light and wind dual elemental. This kind of elemental is very rare and should only be possessed by bloodline Yuan spirits. Perhaps there's a mysterious force behind her. Nye Tion's expression darkened. He had long since known that Nye Yuro was not a member of the Nye family, but rather an abandoned infant that Nye Tion's fourth uncle had picked up from the shattering Cloud Mountain range. However, Nye Tion's fourth uncle was already dead, so he had no way of finding out about Nye Yuro's past. Nye Tion had previously guessed that Nye Yuro was a child abandoned by some great family clan. But now, it seemed that this great family clan was far more terrifying than he had imagined. At this moment, Nye Tion suddenly thought of someone. He quickly walked out of the room and glanced at the crowd. When he saw Sun Hai, he said, Mr. Sun Hai, please come in. At this moment, Sun Hai was still staring at Jean de Bayo in a daze. The latter was scared by his stare. Sun Hai was stunned for a moment and actually couldn't react for a moment. You pervert, boss told you to go over, didn't you hear? Jean de Bayo shouted loudly, as if he had grabbed onto a life-saving straw. When everyone saw this scene, they were all stunned. Sun Hai was from the Sumeru world, and Jean de Bayo actually called him a pervert. The ignorant were truly fearless. What made everyone even more curious was that Sun Hai actually didn't get angry. Instead, he chuckled, agreed, and entered the room. Nye Tion looked at Sun Hai's expression and thought of the 3,000 demon god seals on Jean de Bayo's body. He immediately understood. This is... Sun Hai entered the room and suddenly felt the power in the space. His expression changed, and his entire body was petrified. Nye Tion was slightly stunned, and his heart inexplicably sank. Could it be that Sun Hai saw something? After a full 10 seconds, Sun Hai's expression slightly improved, and he slowly reacted. His eyes looked at Nye Yuro in shock, and actually revealed a strong fear. Mr. Sun Hai, what did you see? Nye Tion couldn't help but ask. Sun Hai didn't answer his question, but asked, who is she? My little sister. Nye Tion said. Little sister? Sun Hai was stunned, and then immediately exclaimed, impossible. She is obviously from the Holy Light Empire. Sun Hai suddenly realized something, and didn't continue the following words. Was the Holy Light Empire? Nye Tion's expression darkened, and he asked. I can't say. Sun Hai realized that he had said something wrong, and his expression became nervous. The Holy Light Empire was the supreme imperial power of the Sumeru world, and a force even more powerful than the 10,000 demons Dragon Abyss. Sun Hai didn't dare to say anything about this force. Nye Tion frowned. Seeing Sun Hai's secretive look, he couldn't force him. It seemed that the Holy Light Empire was a terrifying force that couldn't be mentioned. Sun Hai stared at Nye Yuro. His expression was still calm, but his heart was in turmoil. He couldn't understand. How could the people of the 10,000 demons Dragon Abyss become siblings with the people of the Holy Light Empire? This was too crazy. Mr. Sun Hai, do you know what happened to my ninth sister? Nye Tion asked immediately. Sun Hai looked at Nye Tion with a troubled expression, and after hesitating for a long time, he said, her body has awakened the 1,000-gem phantom seal. This is not a bad thing for her. 1,000-gem phantom seal? Nye Tion was slightly stunned. Sun Hai continued, I can't explain too much to you, but I can tell you that this is an extremely powerful phantom seal. Once it awakens, Your ninth sister is destined to become the most terrifying illusionist. Nye Tian frowned, and he was pleasantly surprised and shocked. He knew better than anyone else how terrifying an illusionist was. The corpse demon monarch was also an illusionist. Although he was only at the 6th rank, he was already one of the 9 great demon monarchs. And one of the 9 emperors, the illusion emperor Bailey Fengshun, was only a 7th rank illusionist, but he was already the strongest illusionist. 1000 Gem, Phantom Seal. At this moment, the corpse demon monarch's voice sounded again, and his throat was hoarse. Nye Tian was stunned. It seemed that the corpse demon monarch knew about the 1000 Gem Phantom Seal. Master, I'll explain it to you later. Let's hear what this sealer has to say first. The corpse demon monarch said, without waiting for Nye Tian to ask. Nye Tian nodded, and his eyes flickered. He asked, Mr. Sun Hai, other than a powerful phantom seal, the 1000 Gem Phantom Seal is also the symbol of a terrifying family, right? Sun Hai was stunned, and his eyes widened. His expression was clearly saying, How did you know? Nye Tian had guessed it. He reckoned that Sun Hai had determined that Nye Yuro was from the Holy Light Dynasty through the 1000 Gem Phantom Seal. Based on this, the 1000 Gem Phantom Seal was the symbol of the Holy Light Dynasty's royalty. Nye Tian's guess was right. Sun Hai had found out Nye Yuro's identity through the 1000 Gem Phantom Seal. The 1000 Gem Phantom Seal was indeed the symbol of the Holy Light Dynasty's royalty, but not every Holy Light Dynasty's royalty could awaken the 1000 Gem Phantom Seal. Moreover, the truth was that it had been several hundred years since anyone in the Holy Light Dynasty's royalty had awakened the 1000 Gem Phantom Seal. Chapter 709. Seeing Sun Hai's reaction, Nye Tian knew that he had guessed correctly. The 1000 Gem Phantom Seal was the symbol of the Holy Light Dynasty's royal family. Nye Yuro was a member of the Holy Light Dynasty's royal family. Although Nye Tian had only heard about the Holy Light Heaven Dynasty from Sun Hai, he could tell that it was a very powerful dynasty that was definitely more powerful than the Heaven Sword Pavilion, or even more powerful than the Myriad Demons Dragon Abyss. Nye Yuro was a member of the Holy Light Dynasty. Why would she appear in the 3000 Small Worlds? It was very strange. But this wasn't what Nye Tian needed to think about now. The most important thing was how to wake Nye Yuro up. Mr. Sun Hai, how long will it take for the 1000 Gem Phantom Seal to awaken? When will my 9th sister wake up? Nye Tian asked as he looked at Sun Hai with burning eyes. Sun Hai thought for a moment and shook his head. I don't know. Under normal circumstances, the stronger the illusory imprint, the longer it would take to awaken. The 1000 Gem Phantom Seal is different from ordinary Phantom Seals. It takes at least several days to awaken. For hundreds of years, no one had awakened the 1000 Gem Phantom Seal in the Holy Light Dynasty. Sun Hai didn't know how powerful it was, but it was said that the 1000 Gem Phantom Seal was the reason why the Holy Light Dynasty could become the supreme imperial power of the Summer world. The Holy Light Ancestor was the person who possessed the 1000 Gem Phantom Seal. It was because of him that the Holy Light Dynasty could stand for hundreds of years. What Sun Hai saw in Heaven Luo City was even more shocking than what he saw in the Sumeru world. First, he encountered the ancient dragon soul. Then, he encountered a fat sealing master that was rarely seen in 1,000 years. Now, he saw a person awakening the 1000 Gem illusory seal. Sun Hai simply felt that this small Heaven Luo city was even more terrifying than the Sky Sword Pavilion. He couldn't see what kind of person Nye Tian was anymore. He even began to wonder if he should bring Nye Tian back to Sky Sword Pavilion. Corpse Luo, is what he said true? Nye Tian asked Corpse Luo Demon Lord worriedly. Corpse Lord Demon King nodded and said, Master, 1000 Gem Phantasm is the strongest phantasm of the demon world. Rumor has it that its power is even stronger than the Demon King's demon devouring heaven phantasm. This level of phantasm requires at least half a month to awaken. The 1000 Gem Phantom Seal came from the demon world. Are you sure? Nye Tian was even more surprised when he heard Corpse King's words. Sun Hai said that the 1,000-gem mirage seal was the symbol of the Holy Light Empire. How did it become the strongest mirage seal of the demon world in the mouth of the corpse demon monarch? Yes. Master, do you still remember Tang Yuyu? Demon King Corpse Luo was very certain. What's wrong? Nie Tian did not know why Corpse Demon Monarch suddenly mentioned Tang Yuyu. Tang Yuyu is a member of the Hidden Soul Clan of the demon world. The Hidden Soul Clan is one of the 3 great wonders of the demon world. They have 2 primary spirits, one dominant and one recessive. Corpse Luo, Demon Monarch, pondered and said, the other clan of the 3 wonders is the Qianlong clan. The Qianlong illusory seal is the symbol of the Qianlong clan. I'm sure that the Holy Light Empire mentioned by this sealer is the Qianlong clan of the demon realm. Nie Tian's eyes flickered violently, and his heart trembled violently. He couldn't believe that the dynasty was established by the demon realm. According to Corpse Luo Demon Lord, Nie Yuro was also from the Qianlong family. She was also from the demon realm. The demon realm, human realm, and heaven realm were all humans. It was just that they lived in different places. The demon realm lived in the 9 netherworld. The human realm lived in the 3,000 small worlds and Shumi world. The heaven realm referred to the divine realm of the heaven realm. Corpse Luo Demon Lord once said that the 3 wonders of the demon realm were hidden clans. Even the demon realm didn't know much about them. From the looks of it, the Qianlong family and the Sacred Light Dynasty could be equated. Corpse Luo, won't there be any danger for Ninth Sister to awaken the 1,000-gem phantom seal? Nie Tian became cold. She won't. Corpse Luo Demon Lord chuckled. Not only will there be no danger, but she will also be able to absorb large amounts of heaven and earth spiritual energy. In half a month, Miss Ro Er's strength will increase by at least 1 major realm. Increase by 1 major realm in half a month. Nie Tian was stunned. Nie Yuro was already at the 9th level of the Wanxiang realm. If she increased by 1 major realm, she would be at the 9th level of the Giant Soul realm. Most importantly, she was only 11 years old. An 11-year-old 9th level Giant Soul realm martial artist. My God, if those people in the Shumi spiritual capital knew of Nie Yuro's existence, they would all smash their heads into tofu. Knowing that Nie Yuro would be fine, Nie Tian finally heaved a sigh of relief. Walking out of the room, Nie Tian closed the door. Boss, is Ninth Sister all right? Jean de Bayo asked anxiously when he saw Nie Tian come out. Ninth Sister is fine, but she won't wake up anytime soon. Nie Tian smiled and said to Qiu Shan, Qiu Shan, guard here for a period of time. Before Ninth Sister wakes up, don't let anyone enter the room. Yes. Qiu Shan nodded heavily. Nie Tian let out a long breath. Seeing Sun Hai staring straight at Jean de Bayo, he could not help but smile. Mr. Sun Hai, my brother's talent as a sealer is not bad, right? Sun Hai was stunned for a moment, then nodded desperately. Nie Tian nodded with a smile. His talent is not bad, but he doesn't have a good teacher. After saying that, Nie Tian stepped forward. Sun Hai's eyes suddenly widened, and both his eyeballs were shining. However, Nie Tian's figure was already far away. Jean de Bayo looked at Sun Hai suspiciously, as if he understood what Nie Tian meant. Nie Tian returned to the main hall again. After discussing some matters with Tang Hao and the others, he prepared to let Tang Hao return to the Shumi spiritual capital first. In a few days, Nie Tian would also return to Su Mi's spiritual capital. A lot of spiritual materials were needed to refine the Qi absorption formation at the Qi vein. These spiritual materials were all very high grade, and the Pill Maker Guild might not have them. Therefore, Nie Tian still had to make a trip to the spiritual capital black market. Just as Nie Tian and the others walked out of the main hall, 2 figures hurriedly appeared. HM? It's him. Nie Tian looked at the 2 people. One of them was Gao Han, and the other was an unexpected person, Lu Mingxian. Lu Mingxian was from the Azura auction house in the spiritual capital black market. Why did he suddenly come to Heaven Luo City? Did something happen to the Azura auction house? Mr. Nie Tian. Lu Mingxian saw Nie Tian from afar and was extremely excited, as if a drowning person had grabbed onto a life-saving straw. Young Master Lu, did something happen? Nietian saw Lu Mingxian panicking and could not help but ask. Everyone returned to the main hall. After a series of inquiries, Nietian knew that something had indeed happened to the Azura auction house. Originally, Long San had died in Nietian's hands, and the 10,000-year ice soul had been taken away. The Long family was already very dissatisfied with the Azura auction house. Later on, Long Heir died in the Shumi martial meet. After the Qilin Lord returned to the black market, the Long family's patriarch was furious and decided to take action against the Azura auction house first. After controlling the entire black market, he would start a war against the 4 great families of the Shumi spiritual capital. Lu Jinghong brought the martial artists of the Azura auction house to fight against the Long family, and sent Lu Mingxian to ask for help from Nietian. Chapter 710. Mr. Nietian, please take people to save my father. At the end of his sentence, Lu Mingxian was already crying bitterly, begging Nietian. Nietian's gaze narrowed. He scanned the crowd and said, Tang Hao, Elder Yi, let's go. The reason why the Azura auction house was hostile to the Long family was all because of Nietian, so he would not sit idly by. Lord Nietian, I'll go with you. Lu Mingxuan's spirit shook as he said with a trembling voice. Nietian waved his hand and said, Lu Mingxian, rest in heaven, Luo City. I will definitely take care of the Azura auction house. With that, Nietian looked at Sun Hai and said in a deep voice, Mr. Sun Hai, you have a space-time teleportation spirit formation on you, right? Sun Hai frowned and said, I only have one teleportation spirit formation. That's for returning to the Shumi world. Give it to me. I'll let Debeo worship you as his master. Nietian did not waste words with Sun Hai and said directly, Debeo? Sun Hai was startled. Then his gaze trembled. That little fatty. Nietian nodded. Sun Hai hesitated for a moment, then revealed a hint of joy on his face. A teleportation spirit formation scroll appeared in his hand, and he handed it to Nietian. Although this scroll was for returning to Sky Sword Pavilion, there was a space-time enchantment at the Yuan-Chi Earth Vein. At that time, Sun Hai and Nietian could enter the Shumi world from there. Nietian took the scroll and opened it. The scroll released a dazzling white light. Countless rays of light surged, and a teleportation spirit formation gradually formed. Nietian had everyone retreat to avoid being sucked into the teleportation spirit formation. The teleportation spirit formation had a specific teleportation location. If Nietian and the others entered now, they would be teleported to the Shumi world's Sky Sword Pavilion. Nietian's body trembled, and a wave of spirit energy surged into the spirit formation. In the next moment, a miraculous scene appeared. The wave of spirit energy fused with the runes of the formation. Rays of white light violently revolved and were as dazzling as the sun. A moment later, the runes on the formation were forcefully altered. Nietian deeply exhaled a mouthful of impure air, saying to Tang Hao and the others, Let's go in. What a terrifying technique. Sun Hai watched from the side with his eyes wide open. This was the first time he had seen someone directly change the runes of a spirit array. How did Nietian do it? Nietian's attainments in the Tao of spiritual formations were definitely comparable to a rank 7 spiritual formation master. Furthermore, the strange thing was that Nietian's essence energy was not of the space-time attribute. So how could he change the space-time teleportation array? However, Nietian's elemental energy attribute was very strange. It seemed to be able to contain various types of elemental energy. What Sun Hai didn't know was that Nietian had just done something crazy. He had forcefully used the power of the stars to change the teleportation spirit array. This was a huge risk. If he had stirred up the spirit array, he would have been sucked into the array, and Nietian would have been sent directly to the Sumeru world. Nietian had no choice but to take the risk. If they went directly to Sumi Spirit Capital, it would take at least 3 days. At that time, the Azura auction house would probably be gone. The teleportation spirit array was changed. Nietian, Tang Hao, and Elder Yi entered the array. A few seconds later, The three figures disappeared along with the spirit array. Nyetian felt a dazzling white light fly in front of him. When he opened his eyes again, everything in front of him had changed. They had already arrived at Sumi's spirit capital. Nyetian and Elder Yi had already been to the black market once, so they were familiar with the road. Very quickly, the three figures appeared in the black market. The three figures were like three streams of light, rushing towards the Azura auction house. At the same time, the Azura auction house was in the midst of a tragic, bloody battle. Inside the Azura auction house, there was a mountain of corpses and a sea of blood. The Heaven Burial Association's Long family and the Azura auction house had already been fighting for 5 days. Almost all the people in the Azura auction house had died, and only Lu Jinghong and a few others were still alive. Azura Lu, come out and accept your death. A ruthless voice echoed in the auction house's hall. Lord Qilin's gaze was ferocious. At his feet lay a woman on the verge of death. It was Lu Jinghong's daughter, Lu Yingying. The cold voice echoed in the hall, but there was no response. The surrounding Heaven Burial Association martial artists were arrogant and laughed crazily. Azura Lu, I think you're Lu Wugui, hiding in your mother's womb. Huh? Who would have thought that the dignified Azura king would be such a coward? This is truly an eye-opener. Lord Qilin's lips curled up coldly. He spoke again, Lu Jinghong, if you don't come out, I'll destroy your daughter. However, I won't let her die so easily. Enjoy her screams. Then, Lord Qilin kicked Lu Yingying over and said to the Long family martial artists, the Azura auction house's young mistress is yours. The Long family martial artists looked at the unconscious Lu Yingying with lustful eyes. They almost drooled. One of the martial artists stepped forward and laughed lewdly. He shouted, no one move. Let me do it. Seventh young master. The others cried out in unison when they saw that person. This person was Long Qi. He had always been interested in Lu Yingying. How could he hold himself back now? Young Mistress Yingying, I'm here. Long Qi stepped forward and carried Lu Yingying. Stop. Just then, an angry roar sounded. Lu Jinghong appeared with a pained expression. Lord Azura, you're finally willing to show yourself. Lord Qilin smiled coldly. A cold smile appeared on his face. What? Lu Jinghong's eyes trembled. Lord Qilin smiled coldly and said, Lu Jinghong, you protected Nyetian's life. What's your relationship with him? 2 of the Long family's geniuses died because of Nyetian. Shouldn't the Azura auction house pay the price? Lu Jinghong frowned and looked pained. He saved Nyetian because he wanted to repay his debt of gratitude. He didn't expect to buy the root of today's disaster. Lu Mingxian went to ask for Nyetian's help, but didn't return. Was Nyetian not coming? Was he wrong about Lu Jinghong? Sigh. Lu Jinghong, had eyes but failed to see. I shouldn't have saved him. Lu Jinghong couldn't help but let out a long sigh. Lu Jinghong, you destroyed your life's work because of Nyetian. How stupid. Lord Qilin smiled coldly and released a chilling aura. His murderous intent enveloped Lu Jinghong. Just as Lu Jinghong was about to give up, a voice was heard. Lord Azura, I'm late. A voice came from the void. A terrifying sword essence pierced through the air. Swoosh! The sword essence was extremely fast. A terrifying aura bloomed in the air. Long Qi didn't have time to react. His head flew into the air and blood splattered everywhere. Then a figure flashed by and caught Lu Yingying. In a flash, he landed next to Lu Jinghong. It was Nyetian. Chapter 711. Nyetian arrived in a domineering manner. His eyes were cold like a wolf staring at a flock of sheep. As soon as he arrived, he killed Long Qi. The Long family martial artists looked at the corpse on the ground and were all stunned. Long Qi, a direct descendant of a Long family and a spirit wheel state martial artist, was killed by Nyetian in an instant. Who exactly was he to be so powerful? The most frightening thing was that Nyetian looked so young. He seemed to be less than 20 years old. His talent was too terrifying. Nyetian's gaze swept across the Long family martial artists, and they all lowered their heads, not daring to look at him. Nyetian. Lord Qilin's hollow face faced Nyetian, and the corners of his mouth curled up into a cold smile. You want to turn the tide by yourself? Wishful thinking. Since you're here today, don't even think about leaving alive. Lord Shielan was still thinking about how to kill Nyetian, but he didn't expect that Nyetian would come to him on his own. Although Nyetian was strong, Lord Shielan didn't care about him at all. To put it bluntly, apart from Tang Hao, he wasn't afraid of anyone in the 3,000 small worlds. Lord Shielan practiced the 3 ninja tactics, which could instantly seal the opponent's elemental meridians and make them unable to use their elemental energy. Other than Tang Hao, who had the ghost eye, Lord Shielan wasn't afraid of anyone. He had fought with Tang Hao before, and both of his eyes were taken by Tang Hao. His disciple, Long Air, was also killed by Tang 13. He hated the Tang family martial artists to the core. Lu Jinghong also looked at Nie Tian in astonishment. If Nie Tian came alone, he wouldn't be able to change anything. Nie Tian looked at Lord Shielan, and the corners of his mouth curled up. He smiled faintly and said, "Who told you that I came alone?" Before Nie Tian could finish his sentence, Lord Shielan suddenly felt 2 abnormally powerful auras approaching. His expression instantly changed, and he shouted, "Watch out!" Unfortunately, it was already too late. In midair, a terrifying sword intent whizzed out. The sword radiance bloomed in the air, and a ferocious aura rolled over. As the blade light fell, Yi Linyun's domineering figure descended, looking majestic. The dozen or so Long clan cultivators did not even have time to react before the ferocious saber intent minced them into meat paste. Elder Yi was the soul of the saber. His saber Dao realm was unimaginably high. He was just 1 step away from comprehending the mysteries of the saber and becoming a peak saber wielder. Even a 9th-tier divine wheel expert would find it difficult to withstand the power of his blade. Almost at the same time, another figure appeared with Elder Yi. Tang Hao. Lord Shielan's voice became shrill as he sensed a familiar aura. Tang Hao. Lu Jinghong was surprised when he heard the name. He could not hide the joy on his face. Although he rarely left the black market, he had heard of Tang Hao's name. He was the head of the Tang family, the leader of the 4 aristocratic families, and the most powerful person in the 3,000 lesser worlds. Since he was there, everything would be easier. Lu Jinghong looked at Nie Tian in surprise. He did not expect the latter to invite Tang Hao. As for the saber wielder beside Tang Hao, although he only had the strength of a 7th-tier divine will expert, his battle prowess was no weaker than that of a pinnacle divine will expert. With the arrival of these 2 people, the Shura auction house could be saved. "You're the Black Shielan." Tang Hao also recognized Lord Shielan. He was slightly surprised, and then his face became gloomy. "Tang Hao, I'll leave this person to you." Nie Tian knew that Lord Shielan's methods were very strange, but the ghost, I was his nemesis. Therefore, it was most suitable for Tang Hao to kill this guy. "Yes." Tang Hao nodded respectfully and took a step forward. His eyes suddenly changed as he activated the Myriad Tribulation Ghost Eye. The space around him froze, and a terrifying eye power surged out. In the void, a terrifying blood-colored light appeared. It shot toward Lord Shielan like the wind and lightning. It was fierce and murderous. When Lord Shielan saw Tang Hao again, he was afraid and did not react in time. By the time he wanted to make a move, it was already too late. The fatal blood-colored light could not be blocked. Boom! At that moment, a powerful palm force fell from the void, causing the space to tremble violently. It blocked Tang Hao's fatal attack. Then, 2 figures descended and landed next to Lord Shielan. One of the figures was very familiar to Nie Tian. It was the first elder of the Long family, Long Qianshou. The other figure was a burly old man. His expression was cold, and his eyes were sharp. He was the one who had blocked Tang Hao's attack with a palm strike. Long Kaimi, the head of the Long family. Lu Jinghong's eyes trembled violently when he saw the newcomer. The newcomer was the head of the Long family, Long Kaimi. In fact, Long Kaimi was not only the head of the Long family, but he was also the president of the Heaven Burial Society. "You're Nie Tian?" Long Kaimi's expression was stern. He took a step forward, and his chi aura surged out. Long Kaimi's chi aura was cold and terrifying. Even though he was standing 100 meters away, Nietian could still feel an intense pressure. I'm Nietian, Nie Tianling replied coldly. His eyes were calm and indifferent. Nietian, you've killed so many people from the Long family, and you still dare to come to the black market? If I don't kill you today, I will not be fit to be the head of the Long family. Long Kaimi suddenly raised his head and locked his cold eyes on Nietian. His face was contorted with extreme anger. Humph, yeah, Tianling chuckled and said calmly, then you can't be the head of the Long family anymore. His voice was calm, but it was filled with sharpness. Nietian's gaze was so calm that it made people's hearts palpitate. He stood there like a sharp sword. Lu Jinghong could sense Nietian's calmness. His expression was one of disbelief. Even Tang Hao would not dare to look down on Long Kaimi like that. You're indeed insolent. But to be insolent, you must have the right to be insolent. Do you have the right? Long Kaimi's eyes flickered. He released a murderous aura and fiercely pounced on Nietian. Nietian's body trembled slightly. He instantly released an insolent sword will. The air shook violently, and the two auras collapsed at the same time. Long Kaimi was slightly stunned. He did not expect that Nietian would be so powerful. His aura was not weaker than his at all. Niet Tianling smiled coldly and said directly, Elder Yi, I'll leave Long Qianshou to you. Leave the head of the Long family to me. All right. Elder Yi solemnly nodded. He took a step forward, and a majestic aura surged out and pressed down on Long Qianshou. Long Kaimi's gaze was sluggish. Then, the corners of his mouth curled up into a cold smile. His eyes were filled with disdain. Nietian, you think you, a trash in the fourth tier of the divine wheel, can fight against me? Make your move. Nietian could not be bothered to talk nonsense with Long Kaimi. He let out a low shout and opened the space of the divine wheel. It perfectly fused with the sword of warp and weft. The sword of the divine wheel appeared again. Nietian's entire body turned into an unsheathed, sharp sword. Long Kaimi was a warrior at the peak of the divine wheel. Did Nietian really want to fight with him? Brat, your aura is very strong. I wonder if you can take a palm strike from me. Long Kaimi smiled coldly. A murderous aura whizzed out of his body and enveloped his entire body. Chapter 712. When Long Kaimi struck out with his palm, a clap of thunder resounded in the sky. The powerful palm force was like a landslide and a tsunami, extremely terrifying. Thunder element origin spirit. Nietian's eyes narrowed slightly, and a strange light flashed in them. His entire body shook as he slashed down with his sword. Surging sword intent that contained boundless lightning power surged out, causing the space around him to tremble violently. It was as if a blinding rift had been slashed open in the air. Boom! Crack! In the void, the palm and the sword collided. It was a contest between thunder and lightning. The violent power of thunder rumbled, and the two forces of thunder and lightning intertwined. The sky flashed, and in an instant, the space within a radius of 100 meters became a sea of thunder and lightning. Boom! With another explosion, the power of the purple thunder and lightning was torn apart by the swift and fierce sword chi. A terrifying sword shadow with a destructive aura attacked Long Kaimi. Long Kaimi's heart trembled, and he immediately struck out with his palm again, forcibly blocking the destructive sword. However, his body couldn't help but take a few steps back, and he looked very embarrassed. Everyone was stunned, especially Lu Jinghong, who cried out in surprise. He couldn't believe his eyes. Long Kaimi was repelled by a single sword strike from Nietian. Long Kaimi was an expert at the peak of the spirit wheel realm, while Nietian was only at the fourth tier of the spirit wheel realm. Lu Jinghong didn't know that Nietian had not only killed an expert at the peak of the spirit wheel realm, but also defeated a sword spirit swordsman at the heavenly evolution realm. Just now, Nietian was able to repel Long Kaimi with a single sword strike because his thunder element sword could suppress all the power of thunder and lightning, which was the perfect counter to Long Kaimi. Long Kaimi steadied himself, and his eyes couldn't help but tremble violently. Of course, he could also feel that the thunder energy in Nietion's sword had completely suppressed his purple thunder 9 roars origin spirit. The purple thunder 9 roars was Long Kaiami's origin spirit, and it was 9 terrifying bolts of purple thunder. The thunder element origin spirit was extremely powerful, and it was much more overbearing than the earth element origin spirit. Long Kaiami relied on the 9 roars of purple thunder to be able to look down on the other spirit wheel experts. However, he had not expected that his purple thunder 9 roars would become his weakness when facing Nietion. He was completely suppressed by Nietion. Long Kaiami, your strength is only SOSO. Nietionling sneered. He didn't give his opponent any chance to catch his breath. He stabbed out with his sword again. Boundless sword intent spread out for 100 meters, and a 100-meter-long lightning sword appeared. It was like a flood dragon emerging from the sea, pressing down on Long Kaiami. Among the 3 sword intents, Nietion's comprehension of the lightning sword intent was the weakest. He could borrow Long Kaiami's purple lightning energy to properly comprehend the lightning sword intent. Long Kaiami's gaze slightly tightened. Shortly after, 3 bolts of purple lightning appeared behind him. In an instant, the purple and white lightning released a dazzling radiance that illuminated the entire auction hall. Purple lightning snake. Long Kaiami shouted in a low voice. His eyes flickered with a ruthless glint. Even if his 9 roars of purple thunder spirit was suppressed, his strength was far beyond that of Nietion. Therefore, he was still confident that he could defeat Nietion. The 3 bolts of purple lightning danced in the air and actually turned into 300-meter-long purple lightning snakes. They bared their sharp fangs, and a ruthless aura spread out. The next moment, the 3 purple lightning snakes moved at the same time. Their huge bodies rolled out and pressed down on Nietion. Nietion's eyes narrowed slightly. Shortly after, his body lit up with a layer of dark blue light. The Sky Yuan armor of Water Pole was activated. Rumble, rumble, rumble. The 3 purple lightning snakes attacked at the same time, and the power of lightning overflowed in all directions. The moment they touched the Sky Yuan armor of Water Pole, they directly entered Nietion's body and disappeared in the blink of an eye. At the same time, Long Kaiami was hit by Nietion's sword. He directly spat out a mouthful of blood, and his body could not stand steadily. How could he have expected that he would be beaten by Nietion in just 2 moves? When he saw the strange scene happening to Nietion's body, his eyes widened and his mouth opened wide, but he could not make a sound. The Sky Yuan armor of Water Pole acted as a buffer. The 3 purple lightning snakes turned into the power of lightning and entered Nietion's body. Not only did they not cause any harm to him, but they were directly devoured by the power of the stars and instantly turned into nourishment for him. Boom! Nietion's body suddenly shook, and his aura actually increased a lot. Endless sword will of lightning spread out, and his whole body was bathed in lightning, as if he was the god of thunder. He broke through this. Everyone sensed that Nietion's aura had increased a lot, and when they used their divine senses to check, they were extremely shocked. Not only did Long Kaiami fail to kill Nietion with 1 move, but he also inexplicably helped Nietion's strength increase by a layer. This is impossible. Long Kaiami was stunned, and as if he had just woken up from a dream, he roared angrily, and his face became ferocious. He suddenly looked at Lord Qilin and Long Qianshou, who were already dumbfounded, and became even more furious. He shouted, "What are you 2 waiting for? Attack!" Lord Qilin and Long Qianshou suddenly came to their senses and then looked at Nietion, but the other 2 figures blocked their way. The battle between Nietion and Long Kaiami was about to end, and Tang Hao, an elder, he couldn't let Lord Qilin and Long Qianshou interfere at that moment. Nietion's strength increased, and his face was full of joy. Long Kaiami's purple lightning was simply the best nourishment for him, and the latter's strength was not weak. If he completely devoured it, Nietion's strength would increase by at least a few layers, and he might even reach the 9th tier of the divine wheel. This was an excellent opportunity for Nyetian. As soon as he thought of that, Nyetian took a step forward, and his battle will was wild. His whole body was full of murderous aura, and it made people's hearts palpitate. He raised his arm, and the sharp, long sword slashed out. The ferocious sword will rolled over, and Long Kaime's heart trembled violently. Immediately, 6 purple lightning appeared behind him, and like tentacles, they turned into giant purple lightning snakes, which rushed towards Nyetian's swordlight. Hiss! Hiss! In the void, a frightening sound could be heard, and 6 giant purple lightning snakes actually entangled the lightning swordlight. Nyetian's eyes narrowed slightly, and then his whole body released in even more terrifying sword will. The lightning sword suddenly expanded, and the majestic sword will of a swordsman bloomed. The violent power of lightning instantly erupted. Bang! 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 A violent explosion sounded in the sky, and the 6 giant purple lightning snakes were directly shattered, and the power of the purple lightning dissipated in the air. The lightning sword will suppression on the purple thunder 9 roars was too strong, and Long Kaime couldn't fight back in front of Nyetian. Nyetian took a step forward, and the sword will spread out from his body, turning into a giant sword will net. He himself also turned into a vortex that devoured everything. An endless power of lightning surged into his body. In midair, the power of heaven and earth slowly changed, and it tilted towards Nyetian. At that moment, Nyetian was like the center of heaven and earth, and everything revolved around him. As the power of lightning surged into his body, Nyetian's aura became stronger and stronger, and in the blink of an eye, it had expanded to the extreme. Chapter 7:13. As soon as Nyetian's words entered Long Kaime's ears, they were like thunderclaps that caused him to tremble uncontrollably. Long Kaime looked at Nyetian, who was in the air. His eyes trembled violently. Only one word appeared in his mind: run. Unfortunately, it was too late. Nyetian was in the air. He made hand seals and didn't stop. His aura rose to the extreme, and his killing intent became stronger and stronger. Murderous flowing seal, kill. Nyetian's emotionless voice was heard. Both of his hands fell. A shocking hand seal appeared in the air. It shone with golden light and contained the power of thunder. It pressed down on Long Kaime like a mountain. This time, Nyetian had integrated the sword will of thunder into the murderous flowing seal. He was going to kill Long Kaime in one move. 9 roars of purple thunder. Long Kaime couldn't retreat. His heart trembled violently, and his eyes were filled with despair. But he still wanted to fight for the last time. 9 huge thunderbolts appeared behind him. Long Kaime was in the center of the 9 thunderbolts. His body was covered in thunder and lightning. The space around him was filled with the terrifying power of thunder. Thunder was the element with the strongest attack power among the 9 elements. Anyone who encountered such power would find it hard to resist. Unfortunately, Nyetian was an exception. The 9-star dragon vein body contained the power of the Sea of Thunder. Nyetian's body was filled with the power of thunder. The power of thunder couldn't harm him at all. Boom! Long Kaime's body trembled. This was his last fight. It was a matter of life and death. He couldn't help but tremble nervously. Boom! Boom! In the void, a series of thunderous sounds rang out one after another. In the next instant, the 9 bolts of lightning gathered together and turned into a giant lightning snake that was several hundred meters long. The snake flicked its tongue, and the power of lightning surged, giving off a suffocating pressure. Lu Jinghong was stunned. Even though he was thousands of meters away, he could still feel the destructive power of the lightning snake. If he were to fight Long Kaime right now, he would probably have died without a complete corpse. What shocked him was that the power of thunder didn't seem to be a threat to Nyetian at all. It was extremely strange. Nyetian had been tempered by the dragon vein in the 9-star dragon vein space. Every meridian in his body was filled with the power of thunder. How could he be afraid of the power of thunder? Nyetian took a step forward and slapped his palm down, sending out the flowing killing seal in a mighty manner. Go! At the same time, Long Kaimi let out a low roar as he staked everything he had. The lightning serpent coiled up and charged toward Nietion. Boom! Crack! In midair, the two thunderbolts collided, and the space within thousands of meters trembled. Dazzling thunderbolts were released in an instant, illuminating the entire auction hall. Inside the hall, all the tables and chairs were affected by the power of thunder and instantly shattered. The ground was also affected, and a huge crack appeared. Everyone retreated. Only Nietion and Long Kaimi were at the center of the lightning. Purple and golden thunderbolts flowed around Nietion's body. There was no fear on his face. Instead, he looked happy. The divine wheel space opened, and Nietion instantly turned into a vortex. He started to absorb the power of thunder. Everyone stared blankly at Nietion, astonishment filling their eyes. At the center of the lightning was the most violent power of thunder. Not only was Nietion not injured, but he was also absorbing this power at a crazy rate. Long Kaimi, who was below Nietion, wanted to control the power of thunder in his body. However, it was useless. He felt that the power in his body was rapidly draining away, while Nietion's power was continuously increasing. After a while, Nietion opened his eyes. His eyes were flashing with the power of thunder. His body moved slightly, and dazzling electricity surged around him. His long silver hair fluttered in the air. Nietion looked like a god of thunder as he stood proudly in the air. "Die, Long Kaimi!" Nietion's eyes locked on a Long Kaimi. His cold and sinister voice rang out. The thunder flowing around him instantly flowed in reverse and gathered in his palm. Boom! Without hesitation, Nietion slammed his palm down. A white lightning whizzed out. Bang! A white light flashed in the air. Long Kaimi didn't even have time to scream before his body exploded. Blood splattered everywhere. Long Kaimi turned into a pool of blood. The Long family's patriarch, the president of the Heaven's Burial Society, had died. The Purple Thunder Nine Roars primordial spirit was the thing that Long Kaimi was most proud of. However, at the last moment, it caused his destruction. Nietion stood in the air. Purple lightning flowed around his body. He had a cold smile on his face as he looked down on everything. At this moment, hundreds of warriors from the Long family had gathered in the auction hall. They had seen Nietion kill Long Qianqiu with one palm. The shock in their hearts was written on their faces. Everyone's eyes were focused on Nietion. Their eyes were filled with surprise, shock, and fear. Their hearts were pounding nonstop. A young warrior who wasn't even 20 years old had killed the patriarch of the Long family with one palm. Not even his bones were left. This shocking scene stunned everyone. It was like a dream. It was unbelievable. If they hadn't seen it with their own eyes, they wouldn't have believed it. "He's dead." After a long time, Lu Jinghong was the first to speak. He was shocked. The one who died in the battle between Nietion and Long Kaimi was actually Long Kaimi. Moreover, Nietion had been suppressing Long Kaimi throughout the entire battle. Long Kaimi hadn't been able to fight back at all. Nietion was too terrifying. There was an incomparably terrifying power hidden in his body. "Patriarch!" Suddenly, an anguished howl rang out. Lord Qilin finally reacted. With a howl, the black robe on his body was ripped open, revealing a face without eyes. He had never expected that the patriarch of the Long family would die at the hands of Nietion. At this moment, apart from grief, Lord Qilin felt even more regret. He regretted not killing Nietion back then. If he had known that Nietion's growth was so terrifying, he would have killed Nietion even if he had to give up his 10,000-year soul. But now, it was too late to say anything. Nietion had already grown up. Even the patriarch of the Long family had been killed by him. Lord Qilin could no longer resist him. At this moment, Nietion's figure descended from the sky. The power of lightning on his body gradually disappeared and entered his body. After absorbing Long Kaimi's power, Nietion's current strength had skyrocketed to the 8th tier of the Divine Wheel. Before the battle with Long Kaimi, his strength had only been at the 4th tier of the Divine Wheel. In a short period of time, his strength had directly risen to the 4th tier. It was so abnormal that it made people's hair stand on end. Nietian knew that he could absorb Long Kaime's power not only because he had the power of lightning in his body. More importantly, the raw star stone had given him the soul to devour the heavens. When this kind of power grew to the extreme, it was enough to devour the heavens and the earth and annihilate everything. Nietian's eyes were cold and stern. His gaze swept across everyone and finally landed on Lord Qilin. His gaze was as cold as a sword. Lord Qilin trembled when he felt the chill, and a look of terror appeared on his face. Chapter 714. Nietian had killed Long Kaime in an unimaginable manner. Everyone was shocked. Lord Qilin felt as if he had fallen into an ice cellar when Nietian stared at him, and his body couldn't help but tremble. Nietian was too powerful. Even the patriarch of the Long family had been killed. For the first time, Lord Qilin was afraid of a martial artist other than Tang Hao. "Teacher, what should we do with these people?" Tang Hao looked at Nietian and asked in a low voice. A cold smile appeared at the corner of Nietian's mouth as he squeezed out a word through gritted teeth. "Kill." As the indifferent voice fell, it landed in the ears of every Long family martial artist. However, it was like thunder from the 9th heaven, causing them to feel a bone-piercing chill. Whoosh! Lord Qilin's figure suddenly flickered and turned into a ray of light. He was trying to escape. Long Kaime was dead, and Nietian's strength was unfathomable. With Tang Hao, Yi Linyan, and the others, the Long family had no chance of winning. Lord Qilin could only escape. Unfortunately, it was too late. Nietian had already said kill. How could he give Lord Qilin any chance to escape? Nietian took a step forward. His figure was like a sword. Endless power of the stars gushed out, and a huge net covered the sky. Lord Qilin suddenly felt an invisible force pressing down on him from all directions. The force was so strong that he could not resist it. "I'll kill you, you filthy brat." Lord Qilin thought that even if he couldn't fight Nietian and the others, no one would be able to stop him if he wanted to escape. However, he was wrong. Nietian didn't intend to give him the chance to escape. Lord Qilin suddenly turned around and struck out with his palm. The 3 ninjas flew out at top speed. But right at this moment, he suddenly let out a cry of surprise. He actually felt that all the Yuan meridians in his body were being suppressed, and the surging net that covered the sky released a boundless power, not allowing him to fight back at all. The 3 ninjas had just flown out when they were engulfed by the totem. Boom! In the next moment, the totem flew out and trapped Lord Qilin. At that moment, Lord Qilin suddenly activated his giant spirit true body. A black Qilin snake that was hundreds of meters long appeared. Its huge body began to roll in the hall, trying to break free of the totem. It's just a little black snake. How dare it call itself Lord Qilin? Nie Tianling laughed. He controlled the totem to trap the black Qilin serpent. "Tang Hao," he roared. "Yes," Tang Hao replied. His eyes flickered and a blood-red light shot out. Pooh! A bloody light swept past, and a huge snake head flew in the air. Bloody light splashed in all directions, and the smell of blood soared into the sky. Lord Qilin had been decapitated. On the other side, the great elder of the Long family, Long Qianshou, saw that the situation was not good and wanted to escape. However, his body was directly cut into 2 by Elder Ye's saber. In the blink of an eye, Long Kaime, Lord Qilin, Long Qianshou, and the 3 powerhouses of the Heaven Burial Assembly's Long family were all dead. Lu Jinghong was completely dumbfounded. He did not expect that Nietian's strength had grown to such a terrifying level in just 2 months. The Long family, the most powerful faction in Ling City's black market, was destroyed by Nietian in the blink of an eye. That was too terrifying. The remaining warriors of the Long family were just some useless soldiers and crab generals, completely not worth mentioning. Tang Hao and Elder Yi attacked together and completely annihilated the Long family. The Long family of the Heaven's Burial Society would be erased from the 3,000 demi-worlds. "Are you all right, Mr. Lu?" Nietian walked to Lu Jinghong's side and asked calmly. I'm fine. Lu Jinghong was stunned for a long time before he came to his senses. A while later, some of the lucky survivors of Shura Auction House walked out and gathered around Lu Jinghong. Lu Jinghong ordered everyone to clean up the mess and the corpses on the ground. Then, Nie Tian and the others followed Lu Jinghong to the inner hall of the auction house. Thank you for coming in time, Mr. Nie. Otherwise, Shura Auction House would no longer exist. Lu Jinghong was very grateful, but he also felt a little guilty. Before Nie Tian came, he had been complaining that he had eyes but could not see. You're too polite, Mr. Lu. Nie Tian nodded indifferently and explained to Lu Jinghong why he was late. Shura Auction House had suffered heavy losses in this battle. More than half of them were dead, and the survivors were all injured. However, the Long family was even worse off. 3 of their leaders were killed, and most of their people were dead. In the future, Shura Auction House would take over the Long family. Originally, Nie Tian had wanted to come to Shura Auction House to buy spirit materials for forging formations. Since he was here, he might as well take care of the spirit materials as well. In the next few days, Nie Tian stayed in Shura Auction House. Several days later, he came to see Lu Jinghong again. Inside the room, Nie Tian took out a scroll of spirit diagrams and slowly unfolded it. It was several meters long. All kinds of runes and formations surged on the spirit diagrams, sparkling brightly. This is... Lu Jinghong looked at the spirit diagrams in front of him and felt the vast power contained within them. His expression became sluggish. Tang Hao and Elder Yi were also dumbfounded. So the reason Nie Tian didn't come out for a few days was to draw spirit diagrams. This is the 9 Revolutions Spirit Assimilation Formation. It's an ancient spirit assimilation formation that I accidentally found in an ancient spirit formation book. The corner of Nie Tian's mouth rose. He didn't hide anything and told Lu Jinghong about the origin energy vein. There's such a thing. Lu Jinghong was stunned after hearing Nie Tian's story. He couldn't react for a long time. After a while, Lu Jinghong said, Mr. Nie, forging the 9 Revolutions Spirit Assimilation Formation will require a large amount of spirit materials. My Shura Auction House is willing to provide all of them. Lu Jinghong wasn't an idiot. He could naturally hear the huge benefits behind the origin energy vein. Not to mention the large amount of spirit stones and yuan crystals in the origin energy vein. Just the 9 Revolutions Spirit Assimilation Formation that Nie Tian mentioned must be something earth-shattering. Therefore, Lu Jinghong's intention was very clear. He wanted to cooperate. Mr. Lu, I won't let you provide spirit materials for free. Since Nie Tian had mentioned this matter, it was obvious that he wanted Lu Jinghong to participate in the auction, which could be considered as making up for the Azura Auction House's loss. He said, the Tang family and the Azura Auction House will each take half of the crystals in the Earth vein. Once the 9 Revolutions Spirit Assimilation Formation is activated, Mr. Lu can let 5 martial practitioners enter. Once the 9 Revolutions Spirit Assimilation Formation was completed, it could absorb all the spirit energy in the origin energy vein. The spirit energy in the formation would be so dense that it would liquefy. Cultivating in the 9 Revolutions Spirit Assimilation Formation for a day was almost equivalent to cultivating in the outside world for a year. Nie Tian giving Lu Jinghong 5 spots to enter the formation was definitely a benefit for a genius. Many thanks, Mr. Nie. Lu Jinghong could not conceal his excitement and expressed his thanks repeatedly. Nie Tian nodded slightly, then took out a list of spirit materials and handed it to Lu Jinghong, saying, Mr. Lu, these are the spirit materials I need. Gather all of them within half a month, then transport them to the horizontal sky mountain range. Lu Jinghong took the list and was immediately dumbfounded. His throat involuntarily rolled. There were several hundred kinds of spirit materials on the list. Moreover, they were all Tier 4 and above. There were even quite a few Tier 7 spirit materials. Mr. Lu, is there a problem? Nie Tian smiled faintly. Chapter 715. Tianluo City, City Lord Manor. In a small courtyard, Two figures sat side by side, cuddling together as they quietly gazed at the bright starry sky. Nyetian, that star is so beautiful, Mo Rushi said softly as she lay in Nyetian's arms and gazed at a bright star in the distant sky with her eyes as gentle as water. Do you want it? I'll pluck it for you. Nyetian's lips were close to Mo Rushi's ear, feeling the girl's warm body fragrance, and a smile appeared on his face. The brightest star in the sky, and the woman he loved the most in his arms. This feeling was really good. When Nyetian returned from Lingdu's black market, Mo Rushi had already woken up. She had just woken up and was still a little weak, but her strength had greatly increased. She was already in the 5th layer of the divine wheel realm. Nyetian estimated that once Mo Rushi completely merged with the Nirvana Sacred Heart, her strength would increase even more. Liar, how can you pluck a star? Mo Rushi said coquettishly. Perhaps because she felt a little cold, she was like a little kitten that burrowed into Nyetian's arms. I won't lie to you. Look carefully. Nyetian gently bit the girl's earlobe, then raised his arm. A miraculous scene appeared. The star in the sky actually flew down and landed in Nyetian's hand in the blink of an eye. Mo Rushi's mouth opened into a circle as she looked up at Nyetian in shock. Her appearance was extremely cute. Nyetian smiled faintly as the two of them rose to their feet. With a wave of his hand, the star in Nyetian's hand turned into a sky full of starlight that surrounded the two. So beautiful! Mo Rushi excitedly waved her arms, feeling the sparkling starlight around her. It turned out that the star was originally created by Nyetian, and this falling starlight was the power of the stars. Mo Rushi, with the stars as my witness, I want you to be my wife. Are you willing? Suddenly, Nyetian stretched out his arms and pulled Mo Rushi into his embrace as he asked with a serious expression. Mo Rushi was like a frightened kitten. She lowered her head and said in a voice as soft as a mosquito, I do. When Nyetian first proposed to her, Mo Rushi had accidentally turned him down. This time, she was not going to miss it. Nyetian hugged the girl tighter and whispered in her ear, when Jume wakes up, we'll get married, okay? Originally, Nyetian had planned to propose to Mo Rushi after he became the champion of the Shumi martial meeting, but after Mo Rushi fainted, he was unable to do so. However, none of this was important. The most important thing was that the two of them were finally together. Mo Rushi nodded lightly. Her little face was pressed against his thick chest, and her heart was filled with happiness. After a long time, the two figures slowly separated. After returning to his room, Nyetian sat cross-legged and began to focus on cultivation. He had absorbed the power of Long Kyanme's purple lightning, and now his strength was at the 8th level of the divine wheel realm. After completely refining the purple lightning in my body, my strength will reach the 9th level of the divine wheel realm. Nyetian murmured with a smile and began to inspect his body. In the 1st layer of the Milky Way, almost all of the power of the stars had awakened. The starlight on the origin stones was dazzling and dazzling. Nyetian looked at the heaven-shrouding totem in shock. At this time, the outline of the heaven-shrouding totem could be seen. The power of the stars was connected together, forming a vast and mighty star totem. What kind of power is this? How can it be so terrifying? Nyetian stared blankly at the heaven-shrouding totem, his heart filled with shock. In his eyes, the heaven-shrouding totem turned into strange runes that flowed above the river of stars, as if it had existed since ancient times. This was a vast, majestic, grand, and ancient power. When Nyetian tried to sense this power with his consciousness, it was as if he had touched a deep ocean. He couldn't sense it. The power contained in the heaven-shrouding totem was too strong. Even though Nyetian's spiritual power had reached the 68th level, he still couldn't sense this power. The stronger Nyetian was, the more he could feel the terror of the origin stones. Origin stones, when can I unravel your secrets? Nyetian sighed softly, but then his eyes became resolute. He said indifferently, the origin stones have already merged with me. Anyway, I have plenty of time. Why should I rush now? Nyation could feel that at the same time he awakened the power of the power of the stars was gradually changing his physique. His blood gradually turned dark gold, and even the 9-star dragon veins were gradually being changed by the power of the stars. The power of the stars, the source of power, was too strong. After Nyation finished inspecting the Milky Way, he focused his attention on the 9 dragon origin veins. The 9 dragon origin veins were more lifelike, filled with a sense of surging power. What was even stranger was that within the dragon origin veins, there was a violent power of lightning. Nyation's consciousness probed the dragon origin veins and suddenly felt a mighty power of lightning exploding in his body. The sudden surge of power attacked his body, and Nyation felt as if his body was bathed in lightning. There was a burning sensation, and the sudden pain made him cry out involuntarily. Once again, Nyation entered the space of the dragon origin veins. Above his head, a vast and mighty sea of lightning connected into one. The endless thunder and lightning released a violent power. Nyation suddenly raised his head, and 9 golden dragon origin veins appeared and rushed towards him. Nyation's eyes trembled violently, and he wanted to dodge, but he was shocked to find that his body was imprisoned and he couldn't move at all. Boom! One of the dragon origin veins came crashing down and directly rushed into Nyation's body. At the same time, one of the origin veins in his body merged with the dragon origin veins. The dragon origin veins became lifelike, and the dragon scales, dragon claws, and dragon head were all very lifelike. This strange scene made Nyation completely stunned. He felt that the burning sensation in his body was gone, and in its place was an extremely comfortable feeling. It was as if his body was filled with endless power, and even heaven and earth could be torn apart. Nyation quickly closed his eyes and carefully felt the power of lightning in the dragon origin veins. At this time, he felt the pure dragon origin veins surging in his body, tempering every meridian, every bone, and every inch of muscle. This feeling was too magical, as if he was completely reborn, and breaking out of the cocoon to become a butterfly. Boom! Another dragon origin veins came crashing down and rushed into his body. Endless power of lightning surged in his body, and Nyation felt the powerful energy in his body. It was as if he was the god of lightning at this moment. After a moment, all 9 dragon origin veins entered his body and merged with the 9 dragon origin veins. The dragon origin veins in Nyation's body surged to the limit, and his body had an indescribable, comfortable feeling. Chapter 716. Nyation's eyes narrowed when he saw the spiritual dragon ring light up. He looked into the spiritual dragon ring with his divine sense and was stunned. Within the spirit dragon ring, the seal of the spirit dragon was like the surface of a boundless lake. The little green dragon was slowly swimming on the surface of the lake, causing ripples to spread out. The seal of the spirit dragon was slowly opened, and waves of sealing energy poured into the body of the little green dragon. As the sealing power flowed in, the little green dragon's body grew larger, and the speed at which the seal was opened became faster. Unfortunately, the spiritual dragon seal was too huge and boundless. Who knew how long it would take to open the seal with the little green dragon's power? At that moment, Nyation suddenly felt a huge power lurking behind the seal. The power was so huge that Nyation had never seen it before. Is this the power of the Golden Dragon Emperor's dragon soul? Nyation was stunned. He did not expect the Dragon Emperor's power to be this terrifying. Nyation did not feel such terrifying power, even when he was in the sky, shrouding Totem. The strangest thing was that Nyation could vaguely hear a mighty roar. It was as if there was a huge heart beating strongly in the endless void. Could it be that I can feel the existence of the dragon soul because I have the power of the thunderbolt dragon in my body? Nyation mumbled to himself. He could not feel the existence of the dragon soul before, but now he could. It must be because of the 9-star dragon vein. The spiritual dragon seal and the 9-star dragon vein are the same power. Maybe the thunderbolt dragon chi in my body can help the green dragon open the seal faster. An idea suddenly came to Nyetian's mind, and he was delighted. The power of the spiritual dragon seal was immeasurable. Nyetian had used the green dragon to defeat Sikon Wuji. If he could help the green dragon open the spiritual dragon seal, it would be great news for him. At the very least, he could use the green dragon to fight against a Heaven Evolution realm martial artist. With that thought, Nyetian did not wait any longer. The 9-star dragon vein circulated, and waves of thunderbolt origin energy flowed into the green dragon's body. Roar! The green dragon let out an excited roar as lightning elemental energy suddenly surged into its body. Immediately after, the power of lightning began to take effect. The speed of the green dragon suddenly increased, and the speed at which the seal was opened also increased. It really is effective. Seeing this scene, Nyetian was overjoyed and almost jumped up in excitement. After a long time, he finally calmed down, but his face still carried an unconcealable surprise. The Thunder Dragon energy could help the green dragon open the seal faster, which was equivalent to speeding up the growth of the green dragon. This was great news for Nyetian. In the following period of time, Nyetian cultivated bitterly. Not only did he completely refine the purple lightning in his body, but he also succeeded in growing the green dragon to over 10 meters long. When the green dragon was 5 to 6 meters long, it could already fight against Sikon Wuji. Now, its strength had increased by several times and was even more powerful than before. 10 days later, Nyetian walked out of his room. His ability was already at the 9th tier of the divine wheel. His entire person was as sharp as a sword. Master! At this moment, the voice of the corpse demon lord suddenly sounded from the chaotic original coffin. He was very excited. I feel that the 1,000-gem illusion seal has become very violent. It is about to awaken. Good. Let's go take a look. The corner of Nyetian's mouth rose. His figure flashed, and he rushed toward the small courtyard where Nyeyuro was. By now, more than half a month had passed. Looking at the time, Nyeyuro's 1,000-gem illusion seal should indeed be awakened. In the small courtyard, Autumn Mountain was guarding, and no one was allowed to enter. Nyetian hurried over, but he met Sun Hai at the door. Sun Hai must have also sensed that the 1,000-gem illusion seal was about to awaken, and so he rushed over. Behind him, there were 3 people: Jean de Bayo, Ruiyujin Su, and Tawny. Jean de Bayo was now Sun Hai's disciple, and he was following the latter to learn sealing techniques. Ruiyujin Su was following Sun Hai because Nyetian had asked the latter to help him remove the splitting blood seal. Sun Hai had just helped Ruiyujin Su remove the seal, and the latter had already taken off his mask. His face was so handsome that even women would be jealous. Ruiyujin Su and Rui Qinyu were siblings. One was extremely handsome, and the other was extremely beautiful. One had the 9-yang constitution, and the other had 9 colored pupils. They were really abnormal. It could only be said that the bloodline of the Ryu family was very strong. After Tawny took back the Red Lotus demon essence, she had been following Ruiyujin Su. It seemed that the two of them were already together. However, there was some grudge between Tawny and Guwuyo, which was a headache. Seeing Tian again, Sun Hai had just opened his mouth to speak, but he couldn't say anything else. His expression was extremely shocked, and he was dumbfounded. He had only not seen Tian for half a month, and the latter's strength had actually risen from the 4th tier of the divine wheel to the 9th tier. How'd he do this? Moreover, Sun Hai also felt that Nyetian's aura had become even more terrifying. That kind of sharp aura made people's hearts palpitate. Jean de Bayo's reaction was calm. He chuckled and said, "Teacher, don't be surprised. My boss is abnormal. Anything that happens to him is normal." Sun Hai swallowed his saliva and glared at Jean de Bayo fiercely. He reprimanded, "Did I allow you to speak? Until now, you can't even refine a 4th-tier sealing scroll. You will not sleep for 3 days as punishment." The muscles on Jean de Bayo's face twitched, and his eyeballs almost rolled out. Nyetian smiled helplessly, indicating that he was unable to help even if he wanted to. Although Sun Hai was strict with Jean de Bao, his words couldn't hide his love for him. To have such a teacher, Jean de Bao could be considered to have hit the jackpot. "Mr. Sun, let's go take a look." Nyetian didn't wait any longer. He said this and entered the courtyard. Mr. Qiushan saw Nyetian coming over and greeted him respectfully. "Qiushan, you've worked hard." Nyetian nodded slightly. He immediately looked towards the room Nyeyuro was in and felt a vast power about to burst out. At the same time, in the room, Nyeyuro was lying calmly on the bed. The corners of her mouth were still curled up, carrying a faint smile. Her body was emitting a 7-colored light that filled the entire room. However, at this moment, the flowing gentle light suddenly became violent and started to shake. The void also started to shake, and the entire room suddenly became shaky. Outside the room, everyone saw the room shaking and their expressions changed. They didn't know what was happening. Nyetian frowned, and his face revealed a look of worry. "Master, the 1,000-gem illusionary seal is about to awaken." Suddenly, the corpse demon monarch's voice sounded. Sun Hai's eyes also became dull at this moment, and his eyes instantly widened. Boom! In the next moment, the room suddenly exploded. A figure shot up into the sky. It was Nyeyuro. She calmly lay in the air, and the colorful light around her blossomed. An enormous and boundless power suddenly spread out in all directions. Chapter 717. Nyeyuro was lying flat in the air. Circles of 7-colored light circulated around her. At the same time, an enormous power bloomed between heaven and earth. At this moment, everyone present felt their divine sense tremble inexplicably. They immediately spat out a mouthful of blood. The 1,000-gem illusory seal has been activated. Nyetian's mouth was bleeding. He stared at the 7-colored figure in the air, his body trembling uncontrollably. The power circulating between heaven and earth was too strong. It was impossible to resist. When the 1,000-gem illusory seal was activated, the higher the cultivation of a martial artist, the stronger the feeling. Especially Sun Hai. His face was as pale as paper. There was a bright red bloodstain at the corner of his mouth. However, his eyes were burning as he stared blankly at the figure in the air. The moment the 1,000-gem illusory seal was activated, all the martial artists in the 3,000 small worlds felt their minds tremble. Many people vomited blood on the spot. However, the power of the 1,000-gem illusory seal was not limited to just this. At the same time, in the Shumi world above the 3,000 small worlds, a figure suddenly stood up in a spacious land. A silver-haired old man dressed in white had a trace of blood at the corner of his mouth. He had a look of disbelief on his face. "What's going on?" The silver-haired old man's face was as pale as paper. His soul was still trembling. There was also a 7-colored light circulating around his body. If Nyetian was here, he would realize that the 7-colored light on the silver-haired old man's body was exactly the same as the light on Nyeyuro's body. However, the light around the silver-haired old man's body was even more terrifying. It spread out for thousands of meters and filled the entire valley. The light circulating around the silver-haired old man's body made him look holy and dignified. It was as if a god had descended. It was obvious that the silver-haired old man also had the 1,000-gem illusory seal. Could it be? The silver-haired old man suddenly realized something. He closed his eyes. His divine sense roamed thousands of miles away. Everything that happened in Heaven Luo City's city Lord's mansion was seen by him. "That little girl is from my 1,000-gem family." The silver-haired old man opened his eyes. He was shocked. Why would someone from the 1,000-gem family appear in the 3,000 small worlds? What was going on? It's been hundreds of years since someone from the Qianlong family has awakened the Qianlong illusory seal. No matter what, I must bring this young lady back to the family. The silver-haired old man's expression became complicated. He soared into the sky and turned into a ray of light, disappearing into the horizon. A moment later, in the Summer world, Holy Light Empire, Holy Light Imperial City. Today was the birthday of the Empress of the Celestial Empire, and the whole country was celebrating. The Sacred Light Emperor and the Empress stood on the Sacred Light Tao platform. Millions of people cheered, and their gazes became heated as they looked at the two people on the Tao platform in reverence. Today is the birthday of the Empress of the Celestial Empire. I hereby announce that the entire nation will be pardoned, and we will give our blessings to the Empress. The Holy Light Emperor took a step forward. His body was burly, and his voice was clear. Long live the Emperor! Long live the Empress! Below the stage, tens of thousands of people were cheering loudly. The Empress of Sacred Light had a faint smile on her exquisite face. She deeply enjoyed the feeling of being worshipped by thousands of people. However, at this moment, an elegant figure descended and landed directly in the center of the platform. Who is it? Who dares to disturb the Empress' birthday? Seeing that someone dared to descend on the Sacred Light Tao platform, countless figures soared into the sky. The figure turned around indifferently. An invisible force was released, and all the guards were forcibly suppressed by him. Who is this person? He's so powerful. The crowd discussed when they saw this scene. Ancestor. At this moment, the Sacred Light Emperor cried out in surprise. He had never expected that the Sacred Light Ancestor would appear at this time. Could it be that he was here to celebrate the Empress' birthday? The figure that suddenly descended was none other than the silver-haired old man who had sensed the 1,000-gem mark. It turned out that his identity was the Sacred Light Ancestor, the founder of the Sacred Light Empire. The Sacred Light Ancestor casually waved his hand. An array of light flowed into the Sacred Light Emperor's body. A series of images appeared in the Sacred Light Emperor's divine sense. They were the scenes of Nyeyuro awakening the 1,000-gem mark. Qianlongji, tell me what's going on. The Sacred Light Ancestor roared angrily, directly calling out the Sacred Light Emperor's name. Qianlongji was drenched in cold sweat. He knelt down with a thud and said in a trembling voice, Ancestor, I don't know what's going on either. Qianlongji, you must investigate this matter thoroughly. How could a member of my Qianlong family appear in the 3,000 small worlds? The Sacred Light Ancestor waved his long sleeves and said coldly, I'm telling you, this little girl must return to the Qianlong family. Send someone to bring her back. If anything happens to her, you can forget about being the Emperor. With that, the Sacred Light Ancestor took a step and left. Qianlongji knelt where he was and collapsed into a pile of mud. He also couldn't understand why a descendant of the Qianlong family would appear in the 3,000 small worlds. Beside Qianlongji, the Empress's eyes became strange. A cold smile appeared at the corner of her mouth, and she murmured in her heart, 3,000 small worlds, the little girl of the Qianlong family. Could it be that the vile spawn is not dead? At the same time, in the Tianluo City Lord's Mansion, Nye Tian and the others knew nothing about what had happened in the Sacred Light Empire. The people of the City Lord Mansion rushed over, and everyone's eyes were focused on Nyeyuro. The great elder of the Nye family, Nye Wenyuan, looked at Nyeyuro blankly, his eyes completely lifeless. How could he have imagined that Nyeyuro would cause such a huge commotion? Nyeyuro lay quietly in the air, and the seven-colored halo around her spread out for hundreds of meters. Everyone was waiting quietly. After a long time, the seven-colored flowing light in the void began to flow rapidly, and it rapidly flowed into Nyeyuro's body. Seeing this, Nye Tian flew up and held Nyeyuro in his arms. Almost at the same time, there was a sudden turbulence in the void. In the sky, a dazzling white light appeared at an extremely fast speed, rushing towards where Nye Tian was. Nye Tian's eyes narrowed slightly. He felt the appearance of several tyrannical auras, and each aura was very powerful, no weaker than Sikong Wuji's. What a powerful aura! When the crowd saw this scene, they felt the heavy pressure from the sky, and their eyes trembled violently. Oh no! Sun Hai saw several figures in the light, and his face changed. He had already guessed the identity of these people. Sun Hai guessed that Nyeyuro must have awakened the 1,000-gem illusory seal and alarmed the people of the Sacred Light Empire. The people who appeared now must be from the Sacred Light Empire, and they had come to take Nyeyuro away. Feeling the pressure from the sky, Nyetian frowned, and his face turned slightly ugly. He had also guessed something, but he subconsciously hugged Nyeyuro tightly. Chapter 718. Rumble. There was a violent tremor in the void as several figures descended. There were only 3 of them: a stalwart middle-aged man, a coquettish woman, and a devilish young man. Oh no! Sun Hai's heart sank when he saw the faces of the 3. His face stiffened. He did not expect that the Holy Light Dynasty would send such a powerful lineup for Nyeyuro. Sun Hai knew all 3 of them. The middle-aged man was the general of the Holy Light Dynasty, Liu Lai, a peak heavenly evolution realm martial artist. The coquettish woman was the daughter of the Holy Light Dynasty's state preceptor. Her name was Lan Huachi. The devilish young man had the highest status. He was the second prince of the Holy Light Dynasty, Qianlong Inghong. Actually, this was not strange. The Holy Light Dynasty had not produced anyone who had awakened the 1,000-gem illusory seal for hundreds of years. It was understandable that they would send 3 people for Nyeyuro. At a certain moment, Sun Hai's gaze fell on Nyetian. The latter looked at Qianlong Inghong and the other 2 calmly and cold. It was obvious that Nyetian would not hand Nyeyuro over. Even if Nyeyuro was from the Qianlong clan, Nyetian would not hand her over. In Nyetian's eyes, Nyeyuro was already his family. Since Nyeyuro grew up in the Nye clan and her surname was Nye, Nyetian would not give up on her. The crowd stared at the 3 figures in the sky. Their faces were aghast when they felt the intense pressure. Qianlong Inghong's disdainful eyes swept across the crowd. His lips curled into a disdainful smile. He sneered cold. A bunch of ants. He was already unhappy that the Holy Light Emperor had sent him to the 3,000 lesser worlds. Now that he saw Nyetian and the others, he was inexplicably furious. Nyetian's eyes narrowed. He ignored the 3 people and slowly turned around, treating them as if they did not exist. Brat! Just as Nyetian turned around, Qianlong Inghong's voice sounded with extreme disdain and a completely commanding tone. Leave the girl in your hands. Why? Nyetian smiled faintly and looked at Qianlong with a playful look, not concealing the dissatisfaction in his heart. He didn't have a good impression of a newcomer in the first place, and Qianlong's arrogance made him even angrier. Hide-Hyro Qianlong was slightly stunned. He had not expected a cultivator from a lower world to dare speak to him in such a manner. Brat, do you know who I am? Be more polite when you talk to me. Qianlong's voice was cold. He waved his sleeves as a terrifying aura gushed forth from his hands. A violent aura gushed forth from his body. In the next moment, an oppressive aura whizzed out and bore down on Nyetian. Be careful. The crowd couldn't help but exclaim when they saw this. Who would have thought that Qianlong Inghong would be so unreasonable? Just because Nyetian's tone was cold, he immediately attacked. Moreover, as soon as this fellow arrived, he merely glanced at the crowd and directly threw out the words "a bunch of ants." It was as if, in his eyes, Nyetian and the others did not deserve to live at all. Nyetian's body suddenly shook, and a surging sword will burst forth. In the void, a sword shadow whistled out. Kacha! A soft sound was heard, and the crowd's pupils suddenly shrank. A dazzling light burst forth in the air. Qianlong Inghong's aura was directly broken by Nyetian. Qianlong Inghong's eyes were stunned. A terrifying sword will attacked, forcing him to retreat several steps. He was in a very sorry state. How is this possible? Qianlong Inghong's body trembled slightly, and even his voice became shrill. He looked at Nyetian in disbelief. The latter clearly only had the strength of a 9th-tier divine wheel. How could he erupt with such a terrifying sword will? Liu Lai and Lan Huachi also locked their eyes on Nyetian. Their eyes were also filled with disbelief. Qianlong Inghong was a 3rd-tier heavenly evolution warrior. How could he be repelled by a 9th-tier divine wheel warrior with one strike? The strangest thing was that this martial artist was a martial artist from the lower world. In the eyes of these warriors from the Sumer world, the lower world were not worth mentioning at all. But Nye Tian was an exception. He repelled Qianlong Yinghong with one strike. This strength was too strange. Sun Hai also frowned when he saw this scene. Qianlong Yinghong's strength was above Sikong Wuji's. The fact that Nye Tian could easily repel him showed how fast his strength was rising. Nye Tian's status in Sun Hai's eyes had risen by another level. However, Sun Hai was still very worried, because Qianlong Yinghong's strength was not the strongest among the three. Instead, he was the weakest. As for the other two, Lan Huaqi had the strength of a fifth-tier heavenly evolution, and Li Yulai was even more terrifying. He had the strength of a fifth-tier heaven being. Li Yuli's strength was considered a top expert even in the Sumeru world. The Holy Light dynasty sent Li Yulai. It seemed that they were determined to get Nye Yuro. But given Nye Tian's character, he would definitely not call him out. A huge battle between the two sides was on the verge of breaking out. Qiushan. Nye Tian raised his arm, and a gentle force sent Nye Yuro to Qiushan's side. Qianlong Yinghong was repelled by his sword and would definitely not let the matter rest. In order to avoid inadvertently hurting Nye Yuro, he handed the latter over to Qiushan. Nye Tian immediately turned around and looked at Qianlong Yinghong coldly. He smiled coldly and said, "You're only at the third-tier heavenly evolution. Who gave you the courage to be so arrogant?" The cold voice was incomparably ear-piercing in Qianlong Yinghong's ears. It was like steel needles piercing his heart. "Brat, I am a warrior from the Sumer world. I am the prince of the Holy Light dynasty." Qianlong Yinghong roared angrily like an irritated hedgehog. He clamored, "The Holy Light dynasty is the supreme imperial power of the Sumer world and rules over half of the Sumer world. Who do you think you are? You're just an ant from the lower worlds. How dare you speak to this prince like this? You're courting death." As his sharp voice rang out, a terrifying aura erupted from Qianlong Yinghong's body. It was as if his blood had been set aflame, crazily burning. Qianlong Yinghong's body immediately emitted a bloody and violent aura. A terrifying scene appeared in the void, as if thousands of beasts were galloping. "Your Highness, it's just an ant. There's no need for you to do anything. This subordinate will help you kill him." Li Yulai sensed that something was amiss and hurriedly stepped forward. "No, this prince must kill this ant with my own hands." Qianlong Yinghong roared. "He must kill Nye Tian with his own hands." Huh? Nye Tian's eyes narrowed when he sensed the violent aura in the blood chi. Two words appeared in his mind: bloodline power. "Master, it is indeed bloodline power." At the same time, the corpse demon monarch's voice rang out. "I didn't expect the Qianlong family to have bloodline power in addition to the Qianlong fantasy seal." Chapter 719. The bloodline power was somewhat similar to the bloodline original spirit, but it was even more terrifying. The so-called bloodline power was a kind of terrifying power that was inherited through the bloodline. In the entire martial arts world, clans that possessed bloodline power were extremely rare. Clans that possessed bloodline power had all produced experts at the peak of the martial way, at least in the Celestial Emperor realm. When a martial artist's cultivation reached a certain level, they could communicate with the heavens and the earth. Their blood would produce the power of the heavens and the earth, gradually producing the bloodline power. After possessing the bloodline power, a martial artist's body would be able to nurture innate supernatural power. This kind of power was very similar to the spiritual body of heaven and earth. It could also be passed down through the bloodline. When the bloodline power was passed down from generation to generation, the descendants could also awaken the innate supernatural power. However, it all depended on how much bloodline power was inherited. Some people inherited more, while others inherited less. It was all a kind of opportunity and luck. But in general, clans that possessed bloodline power were much stronger than ordinary martial artists. Their martial bodies were far stronger than ordinary martial artists. Nye Tian had never expected that the Qianlong clan was actually a clan with bloodline power, and that Yinghong Qianlong had inherited bloodline power from his ancestors. From the look of it, his bloodline power wasn't weak at all. Bloodline power. I also want to see how terrifying this power is. Nietion felt the boiling bloodline power in the air. Not only was he not afraid, but he also smiled playfully. He rarely fought with bloodline martial artists. Even in his previous life, he did not have many opportunities to do so. Now that he had the chance to fight a bloodline martial artist, he was excited. The crowd below stared at Qianlong Yinghong with burning eyes. At the same time, they were filled with fear. "Stinking brat, you should be proud to die under the power of my bloodline," said Jiangchun. Qianlong Yinghong's throat moved, and his face became ferocious. His blood boiled even more, and a bloody aura surged wildly in the air. It spread and slowly formed a boundary of nothingness. Nietion felt the space around him being wrapped by an invisible force. He could not help but narrow his eyes. Bang! Immediately, Nietion's body swayed, and a sharp sword will burst out. The sword of the divine wheel appeared again, opening up the space dozens of meters around him and forcibly breaking the invisible boundary. What a powerful sword intent! Li Yulai saw that Nietion had directly broken through Qianlong's blood-colored barrier and sensed the sword intent in the air. His face was filled with shock. Nietion stood proudly in the void, like a sharp sword that could split heaven and earth. No power could shake him. This brat's strength is somewhat strange. It's hard to predict the outcome of the battle between your highness and him. Li Yulai became more cautious as his gaze locked onto Nietion. If Qianlong Yinghong was in danger, he would not hesitate to take action. However, what Li Yulai did not know was that in the void, a huge figure had already appeared, staring at everything in the void with eyes as bright as the sun and moon. Shi quietly hid in the space, and even Sun Hai didn't notice his existence. Shi had come out the moment Qianlong, Yinghong, and the other two appeared, but he didn't choose to show himself directly. Instead, he secretly observed everything. Li Yuli's strength made Shi somewhat fearful, so he had to be cautious. If Shi was in his complete form, let alone Li Yulai, even a peak sky emperor martial artist would be a piece of paper in his eyes. However, he was only in the state of a soul, and his true battle prowess was only at the heaven tier. If he fought with Li Yulai head-on, he might not necessarily win. If that heaven tier guy dares to act rashly, I'll give him a fatal blow, Shi said in his heart. He chuckled. I, Shi, am indeed the smartest golden dragon. Bang! Bang! At this moment, two crisp sounds rang out. Two clouds of black gas appeared on Qianlong Yinghong's palms, releasing a strange and terrifying aura. Boom! Boom! In the next moment, two clouds of black gas suddenly bloomed, releasing two rays of cold light. They immediately rushed into the sky and actually turned into a pair of dark wings, releasing a strange and eerie aura. The crowd looked up at the black wings in the sky, their eyes trembling and their expressions aghast. The black wings seemed to be formed by countless black sharp blades. The blades were sharp and flashed with traces of cold air. What a terrifying power! Nietion felt the cold aura, and his eyes narrowed slightly. The barrier in the void was released by this pair of black wings. In the next moment, the black wings suddenly descended, landing on Qianlong Yinghong's back, and actually merged with his body. Qianlong Yinghong and the two sounds fused, and a terrifying aura rolled around his body. His hands were shrouded in black gas, and when they appeared again, they actually turned into sharp steel claws. Seeing this scene, the crowd's hearts trembled violently. Qianlong Yinghong had actually turned into a half-human, half-beast state. Die! The corner of Qianlong Yinghong's mouth raised in an evil manner, and a cloud of black flames surged between his claws. He raised his palms, and the black flames bloomed, spreading for hundreds of meters, directly enveloping him and Nietion. In midair, the black flames burned the prairie, and the figures of Nietion and Qianlong Yinghong could no longer be seen. The space around Nietion was wrapped by the black flames. The flames were very invasive and actually wanted to penetrate his divine wheel sword. Boom! Nie Tian's body shook, and a majestic dragon chi was released from his body, enveloping the divine wheel's sword and blocking the black flames. Qianlong Yinghong frowned, and his lips curved into a cold smile. He didn't expect that apart from a terrifying sword will, Nie Tian also had such a powerful dragon chi in his body. Nie Tian's strength had exceeded Qianlong Yinghong's expectations, but it was not enough to make him afraid. Qianlong Yinghong flapped his wings, and a vast pressure was released, strengthening the barrier in the void. He wanted to use the barrier to firmly control Nie Tian and suppress Nie Tian's key meridians. Don't even think about it. Of course, Nie Tian knew what Qianlong Yinghong wanted. With a faint smile, a heaven slash appeared in his hand, and the 9 dragon meridians in his body began to circulate wildly. Waves of origin energy surged out, turning into the purest sword will. Boom! Without hesitation, Nie Tian stabbed out with his sword. A terrifying sword will bloomed, and a sword shadow whizzed out, bombarding the invisible barrier in the void. Immediately, the surrounding space trembled violently. The invisible spirit power immediately weakened a bit. Qianlong Yinghong frowned again. The power of Nie Tian's sword had actually caused his barrier to shake. This sword was too terrifying. Divine prison black flames, prairie fire. Qianlong Yinghong roared, and his black wings immediately released endless black flames. A destructive aura spread out. Oh no! Nie Tian couldn't help but tremble when he felt the destructive aura. After all, Qianlong Yinghong was a third-tier heavenly evolution warrior, and he had the power of a bloodline. On the other hand, Nie Tian only had the strength of a 9th-tier divine wheel. He had to be careful. Chapter 720. Danger. When the crowd saw the scene in the sky, their hearts skipped a beat as they shouted out in alarm. Qianlong was very strong. His black wings and black flames revealed a very terrifying aura. Warriors from the lower world, no matter how talented you are no different from an ant in front of this prince. The power of the bloodline is not something you can imagine. Qianlong's cold voice sounded. He took a step forward, and the hand of darkness flashed with a strange black brilliance. A terrifying, oppressive force blasted towards Nie Tian. Nie Tian stood where he was, and his eyes regained their calmness. Feeling the approaching destructive aura, he was fearless. His body trembled, and the 9 dragon veins began to operate crazily. His whole body surged with the mighty power of thunder. At this moment, heaven and earth trembled. Qianlong's expression flickered as he sensed a strong threat from Nie Tian's lightning power. Li Yuli's eyes also trembled at this moment. What kind of power was hidden in Nie Tian's body? First it was the terrifying sword intent, then it was the violent dragon chi, and now it was the power of thunder. His trump cards were endless. How could a young warrior from the lower world have such terrifying power? This made Li Yuli feel incredulous. Nie Tian's strength had subverted his impression of warriors from the lower world. Most importantly, Nie Tian was still so young. At this moment, Nie Tianling stared at Qianlong and punched out. The power of thunder instantly condensed and fiercely pounced out. Roar! In midair, 100-meter-long thunder dragon appeared. It roared at the sky and surged with violent thunder, causing the dark boundary in the space to shake. The thunder dragon rolled out and rushed towards the giant hand of black flames in the void. Boom! The void shook and exploded. The thunder dragon and the hand of black flames collapsed at the same time. In an instant, the power of thunder and the power of the divine prison's black flames spread wildly and spread thousands of meters away. In the space, a mighty force surged and only disappeared completely after a long time. When the black gas and lightning disappeared, 2 figures appeared, staring at each other angrily. Both Qianlong's divine prison black flames and Nie Tian's lightning were extremely terrifying. The 2 of them were equally matched in their first head-on clash. However, in summary, Nie Tian's power of lightning was more terrifying. After all, he only had the strength of a 9th-tier divine wheel, while Qianlong Yinghong was a true third-tier heavenly evolution practitioner. Between the two of them, there was a great realm difference. Although Nyetian was only one step away from the heavenly evolution realm, this step was like a chasm between heaven and earth. It was immeasurable. Heaven evolution realm practitioners had the true meaning of heaven evolution, which greatly enhanced their martial body. Their elemental meridians were also much stronger than those of spirit will practitioners. This was the most obvious difference. If Nyetian was a heaven evolution realm martial artist, he was confident that he could kill Qianlong Yinghong in one move. What a terrifying duo! The crowd's eyes trembled as they thought to themselves. The combat strength displayed by Nyetian and Qianlong Yinghong was beyond everyone's expectations. That surging power was suffocating. Liu Lai and Sun Hai both looked at Nyetian at the same time. Their eyes trembled and their hearts were filled with shock. Qianlong Yinghong's divine prison black flames was the power of his bloodline and was abnormally powerful. Even an ordinary third-tier heavenly evolution practitioner would not be able to resist it. Nyetian's lightning power was so powerful that he could actually resist the divine prison black flames with ease. This boy cannot be left alive. A ruthless look flashed in Li Yuli's eyes as a resolute killing intent spread in his heart. Nyetian's strength had exceeded his expectations and even made him feel threatened. With Nyetian's talent, if he entered a higher-level world, it would be unimaginable. In the void, the two figures faced each other. Qianlong Yinghong looked at Nyetian coldly, his eyes filled with endless anger and humiliation. Originally, he thought that he would be able to kill Nyetian in one move after revealing the power of his bloodline. He did not expect that the latter's strength would far exceed his expectations. Martial artists from the middle world are just so. Nyetian laughed and glanced at Qianlong Yinghong with extreme contempt. The power of the Dragon of Thunder had exceeded Nyetian's expectations. A 9-star dragon vein physique was indeed extraordinary. Brat, you're courting death. Qianlong Yinghong was even more furious after being ridiculed by Nyetian. The divine prison wings on his back suddenly rose and a black brilliance bloomed. A forceful pressure spread out and pressed towards Nyetian like a tsunami. Nyetian gently stepped on the ground, and a pair of wings appeared behind him. They were formed by sword shadows and surged with the power of lightning. Golden and purple lightning flashed. It was extremely terrifying. Whoosh! Nyetian flapped his wings and disappeared in a flash. Escape? Do you think you can escape? Qianlong Yinghong sneered and sped up. The black flames raged in the air, and his speed was extremely fast. He was actually twice as fast as Nyetian. In the blink of an eye, he had caught up. Die for me. Qianlong Yinghong's aura locked onto Nyetian. His eyes were incomparably vicious, and his demonic wings fluttered in the air. The divine prison boundary formation was formed again and enveloped Nyetian. Brat, let's see how you can escape now. The divine prison boundary formation trapped Nyetian. Qianlong Yinghong's face became ferocious, and he had already imagined the scene of Nyetian being burned by the black flames in his mind. Nyetian's figure stopped in the air. There was no trace of fear on his face. Instead, a strange smile appeared on his face. In the next moment, Nyetian released endless sword intent. His figure was like a sharp sword. The closer Qianlong Yinghong got to Nyetian, the more pressure he felt. His eyes narrowed and his eyes trembled. He had a bad feeling about this. He wanted to retreat, but it was too late. Boom! All of a sudden, Nyetian's lightning sword intent blossomed around him. 9 enormous lightning dragons appeared behind him, wreathed in raging, wild, and violent power. Qianlong Yinghong immediately realized that Nyetian was running away on purpose to lure him over so that he could trap him with the 9 lightning dragons. Brat, you tricked me. Qianlong Yinghong cursed. He knew that if he retreated, he would die for sure. The only way to survive was to fight with his life on the line. He had underestimated Nyetian and was tricked by Nyetian. Divine prison black flames kill him. Qianlong Yinghong flapped his wings, and the power of the black flames spread out. The The black flames condensed into a sharp black blade in the air and slashed towards Nietian. "You're too weak." With a cold laugh, Nietian's long silver hair fluttered in the wind. His entire face took on a devilish look, and his eyes were filled with disdain. With a shake of his body, the 9 lightning dragons let out roars that shook the heavens. Nietian's 9 lightning dragons instantly burst forth with terrifying power. Like 9 giant lightning bolts, they shone brightly in the sky, emanating an incomparably powerful aura. The lightning dragons were much more terrifying than Long Kaime's 9 purple thunder roars. Even a heavenly evolution realm cultivator would find it hard to resist their destructive power. Chapter 721. The power of the Thunder Dragon was too strong. The power of the 9 dragons wreaked havoc, and the air was filled with a destructive aura. Qianlong looked desperate and puzzled. Nietian was only a warrior from the lower world and only had the strength of the 9th tier of the Divine Wheel. He should have been killed by him in one move. How could he still have the strength to fight back and even kill him? How is this possible? Roar! In the void, the Thunder Dragon roared angrily. The power of thunder and lightning raged in the air, releasing destructive power. The black blade formed by the divine prison black flame was directly submerged in the thunder and completely destroyed. Qianlong no longer had the strength to fight back. He became a lamb waiting to be slaughtered. "Your Highness, pay the price for your arrogance." The corner of Nietian's mouth twitched, and a cold smile hung on his face. The 9 thunder dragons rushed over mercilessly. "Nietian, don't." On the ground, Sun Hai suddenly realized that something was wrong. Nietian actually wanted to kill Qianlong. This was too terrifying. Qianlong was a prince of the Holy Light dynasty. This identity alone was incredible. If Nietian killed him, not only would he bring disaster to himself, but the entire Tianluo city and even the 3,000 small worlds would also be destroyed. The Holy Light dynasty was a giant force in the Sumeru world. Even the Sky Sword Pavilion dared not provoke them. Nietian was simply crazy. "Nietian, he is a prince of the Holy Light dynasty. You can't kill him." Sun Hai shouted at the top of his voice. He thought that Nietian must have dared to kill Qianlong because he didn't know his identity. However, Nietian didn't care. He smiled cold and shouted, "So what if he is a prince? Even if he is the emperor of the Holy Light dynasty, I will still kill him." Nietian didn't care about Qianlong's identity at all. The latter had just arrived at Tianluo City, ignored him, and wanted to take Nie Yuro away by force. Nietian had only stepped forward to say a few words, and Qianlong Yinghong had wanted to kill him. If not for Nietian's strength, he would have been a corpse by now. Qianlong Yinghong could kill him, so why couldn't he kill Qianlong Yinghong? Of course he could. "Don't kill me." Lightning energy roared, and Qianlong Yinghong felt the aura of death. He was so scared that his face turned pale, and he screamed, "Your Royal Highness, when you want to kill someone, you must be prepared to be killed." Nietian walked over step by step, and the power of lightning surged over. Qianlong Yinghong's clothes were all torn apart, and even his skin started to crack. Blood flowed all over his body. The destructive power of lightning was terrifying. As long as Nietian took another step forward, Qianlong Yinghong would definitely be killed on the spot. However, Nietian continued to advance slowly, as if he was purposely trying to torture Hyde-Hyro. "Stop!" At this moment, an angry roar rang out, and then a huge force rushed over. It was earth-shaking and unstoppable. "Danger!" Sun Hai's pupils shrank when he saw this, and his expression became slightly sluggish. At the most critical moment, Liu Lai made his move. Liu Lai was an expert of the 5th level of the Heaven Realm, a top expert of the Sumeru world. The power of his palm was truly destructive. Nietian wanted to kill Qianlong Yinghong, but he didn't. Wasn't it obvious that he was waiting for Liu Lai to make his move? What was he thinking? Large beads of sweat appeared on Sun Hai's forehead, and his nerves were tense. He couldn't understand why he was so worried about Nietian. Wasn't he going to bring Nietian to the Sky Sword Pavilion? In any case, Nietian would die if he went to the Sky Sword Pavilion, and being killed by Liu Lai would also die. What was the difference? Sun Hai was right. Nietian didn't make a move to kill Qianlong Yinghong because he was waiting for Liu Lai to make his move. Big brother Di Shi, I've created a chance for you to make your move. Whether you can kill him in one blow or not depends on you. Nietian felt the huge pressure coming towards him, but there was no fear on his face. Instead, he smiled strangely. The reason why he didn't kill Qianlong Yinghong was not to torture the latter, but to wait for Liu Lai to make his move. Although he didn't sense Di Shi's existence, Nietian was very sure that Di Shi was watching everything from behind. The reason why he didn't make a move was definitely because he was afraid of Liu Lai's strength. Liu Lai was a Heaven Realm warrior, and the current Nietian was not worth mentioning in front of him. Even if Nietian used all his trump cards, it was still impossible for him to fight Liu Lai. If he wanted to deal with this person, he could only rely on Di Shi's strength. However, Di Shi was only in the Dragon Soul state, and his true battle prowess was only at the Heaven Realm. He didn't have the absolute confidence to defeat Liu Lai. Therefore, Nietian lured Liu Lai to make his move, creating an opportunity for Di Shi to make his move. Sure enough, Liu Lai made his move, and he fell for it. Nietian no longer cared about Qianlong Yinghong. The wings behind him shook, and his figure disappeared from where he stood. Liu Lai's figure descended powerfully and attacked. He didn't stop and still wanted to kill Nietian. Human, I'll cripple you. At this time, a mighty and vigorous voice sounded in the void. Between heaven and earth, the space shook violently, and a huge figure condensed in the air and appeared. The momentum of heaven and earth changed, and the space was instantly tightened. Surging dragon Qi filled the air, filling the world. A huge golden dragon had appeared in front of Liu Lai. Although it wasn't a physical body, the surging and roaring dragon Qi, the dazzling golden scales, and the dragon eyes that were as dazzling as the sun and moon gave people an extremely oppressive force. The overwhelming power seemed to be able to destroy everything. Liu Lai was completely stunned by the scene in front of him and cried out involuntarily. Even if he was a Heaven Realm martial artist, he had never seen an ancient divine dragon before. The shock in his heart could be imagined. Di Shi didn't give Liu Lai any time to react. His huge body rolled, and countless golden lightning was suddenly released from the dragon's body. It was like a steel chain connecting in the air. Everyone on the ground was completely stunned. Although many people knew that Heaven Luo City was protected by an ancient dragon soul, it was the first time they saw it at such a close distance. That kind of shock was indescribable. Qianlong Yinghong, Lan Hua Qi, and the others' expressions stiffened. How could they have known that a third-rate city in 3,000 small worlds would have such a terrifying dragon soul protecting it? Roar! At this time, Di Shi roared to the sky, and countless golden lightning condensed into a sea of lightning, directly submerging Liu Lai. General Li, Qianlong Yinghong, and Lan Hua Qi screamed in unison when they saw this scene. Liu Lai was their guarantee on this trip. Once he died, not only would Nie Yuro not be able to take him away, even their little lives would be lost. As long as the ancient dragon's soul killed Liu Lai, the next one would kill them. But it was already too late. Di Shi's dragon body rolled, and a lightning vortex appeared in the center, sucking Liu Lai in. Chapter 722. On the ground, Sun Hai was dumbfounded the moment Di Shi appeared. He almost forgot that Heaven Luo City still had an ancient dragon soul guarding it. The ancient dragon soul won't really kill Liu Lai, right? Sun Hai's eyes flickered with a look of disbelief. He suddenly understood why Nietian did not kill Qianlong Yinghong. It turned out that he wanted to lure Liu Lai to make a move and create an opportunity for Di Shi to make a move. Di Shi was in the dragon soul state, and his body could be hidden between heaven and earth. Even Sun Hai did not discover his existence, let alone Liu Lai and the others. But how did Nietian know that Di Shi was already prepared to make a move? Could it be that he guessed it? If that was really the case, then it had to be said that Nietian's mind was really too terrifying. But Li Yulai was a great general of the Holy Light Empire, a fifth-level heaven being powerhouse. Would he really die just like that? Nie Tion's figure stood 10,000 meters away, staring into the distance with burning eyes. Dishi's timing was very good, and Li Yulai had no time to react at all. This time, even if Li Yulai did not die, he would definitely be crippled. Boom! At this time, a layer of lightning waves suddenly rose in the lightning vortex, and a terrifying aura rose up. Immediately, a figure rushed out of the vortex. It was Li Yulai, not dead. When the crowd saw this, they sucked in a breath of cold air. His flesh and blood was drawn into the lightning vortex, and he actually did not die. This was too inconceivable. Was a heaven-being martial artist really so powerful? The crowd's eyes locked onto Li Yulai, and their gazes instantly became dull. At this time, Li Yulai's body had become very strange. His whole body was covered with dense black scales. His eyes became long and narrow. His body became very long, and his legs even fused together, becoming a long tail. Li Yulai looked like he had become a half-human, half-snake monster. Seeing this scene, Nie Tion's gaze trembled violently, and his expression changed. He felt a burst of heat on his back, and four words appeared in his mind. All-snake spirit body. All-snake spirit body. Li Yulai actually had the all-snake spirit body. No wonder he could rush out of the lightning vortex. The myriad snake spirit body was a low-grade rank heaven spirit body. It was a kind of spirit body with formidable offensive and defensive power. In its final state, the body could break through its limits and condense the myriad snake body. Nie Tion was extremely familiar with the myriad snake spirit body because his eighth disciple, Li Yi, had the myriad snake spirit body. Despicable. Just at this moment, Li Yulai let out a furious roar and released a vast power from his body. The space around him instantly changed, and an invisible spatial barrier formed, preventing him from being attacked by the power of lightning. Even though he had escaped from the lightning whirlpool, his body was still invaded by the power of lightning. His yuan meridians were in turmoil, and he was in extreme danger. Sky Human Domain. Nie Tion looked at Li Yulai, his gaze trembling slightly. The layer of spatial barrier surrounding the latter was the Heaven Realm Martial Artist's Heaven Realm Domain. There were 9 realms in a martial artist, and each realm had a special symbol. Heaven Evolution Realm Martial Artists had the Heaven Evolution True Meaning, while Celestial Realm Martial Artists had the Celestial Territory. The Celestial Territory was a special space derived from the martial artists themselves. In this layer of space, the martial artists were the absolute overlords ruling over everything. Just now, Li Yulai was too nervous and did not open the Celestial Territory. If he could open the Celestial Territory in advance, even she would find it difficult to hurt him. The Celestial Territory was both offensive and defensive. It was extremely terrifying. Normally, only Celestial Realm martial artists could break through that kind of terrifying defense. Human, this is called being smart. Shi's voice rumbled. Dragon Chi raged, and the dragon's might formed an oppressive force, attacking Li Yulai. Boom! The mighty dragon's might attacked the Celestial Territory, causing the space to tremble. The surrounding dark clouds surged, and the wind and clouds changed. Li Yulai was already injured. There was the power of lightning wreaking havoc in his body. His yuan meridians were damaged, and it was difficult to replenish his yuan qi. Even the Celestial Territory could not display too much power. If Shi was allowed to continue attacking, his Celestial Territory would definitely be broken. At that time, there would only be one path in front of him, death. He was very annoyed at this moment. His strength was clearly not weaker than Shi's, but he was suppressed by the latter. This feeling was extremely humiliating. Human die obediently. Shi was extremely pleased. The surging and mighty Dragon Chi became even more berserk. It attacked Li Yulai and triggered the lightning Dragon Chi in the latter's body. Li Yulai felt the Dragon Chi in his body raging violently, attacking his limbs and meridians. It was as if his body was about to be completely torn apart. The intense pain caused him to scream out loud. Immediately after, his yuan meridians were injured. Li spat out a mouthful of blood. Celestial territory, break for this sovereign. Seeing this, Dishi waved his huge dragon claw down. The surging power could topple mountains and overturn the seas, pressing down with a loud bang. Bam! In the void, a crisp sound rang out. The celestial territory around Liu Lai was broken and directly shattered. Die! Dishi's dragon claw swiped down. The sharp dragon claw flickered with a cold blade, tearing everything apart. Big brother Dishi, stop. However, at this moment, a voice rang out. A figure flashed and appeared in front of Dishi. Dishi's dragon claw stopped in midair, only a few meters away from Yetian. It was extremely dangerous. Good brother, what are you doing? Dishi's dragon beard paused in the air, and his huge eyes revealed a puzzled look. Just now, it was clearly Yetian who fought for the opportunity for him to make a move, but now he stopped him from making a move. Why? It's Mr. Yetian. When the crowd saw Yetian's figure, their faces changed slightly and revealed a puzzled look. Phew! Seeing this scene, Sun Hai let out a deep breath of impure air. A big stone hanging in his heart was lifted. He was just worried that if Liu Lai really died in the hands of Dishi, it would not be a good thing for Yetian and Heaven Luo City. The Holy Light Empire was a giant that even Heaven Sword Pavilion did not dare to provoke. No matter how heaven-defying Yetian was, it was still limited. How could he fight against the Celestial Empire? Sun Hai thought that Yetian must have thought of this, so he saved Liu Lai. However, he had guessed completely wrong. Yetian glanced at Dishi and said indifferently, Big brother Dishi, I can't explain it to you now, but I have some things to ask this person. Good brother, big brother believes you. Dishi nodded and retreated, paying attention to Liu Lai at all times. After all, the latter was an expert of the heaven realm. Even if he was injured, it was still very dangerous. Just now, you deliberately did not kill His Highness to lure me to make a move, right? When Liu Lai saw Yetian appear, a hint of disbelief and anger shot out from his eyes. He was not a fool, and of course he could understand everything. He deeply felt that Yetian was too despicable. Myriad Snake's spirit body. However, Yetian did not care about Liu Lai's question. He stared at the latter and said solemnly, Li, who is he to you? Chapter 723. Li, this name was like a boulder bombarding Li Yuli's heart, causing him to tremble uncontrollably. His eyes released a trembling divine light as he stared fixedly at Yetian. Li Yi was none other than Li Yuli's grandfather. Li Lai didn't know why Yetian would mention this name, but it seemed to be a very important name to Yetian. It was precisely because of this name that Yetian stopped Dishi. Li Yi, you really are Li Ye's descendant. Yetian's expression slightly froze, and his gaze couldn't help but tremble. His eyes flashed with a bit of spirit, and endless past events surged in his mind. Li Yi, his 8th direct disciple, was one of the less talented among the 9 disciples. He was originally a general under Yetian and was completely loyal to Yetian. Yetian saw that his character was not bad, so he took him in as a disciple. Li Ye's martial arts talent was not monstrous, but his talent in commanding troops was very high. Sometimes, some of his decisions even made Yetian admire him. Among the 9 great disciples, Yetian was most worried about Tang Hao, followed by Li Yi. After all, Li Ye's strength was not as strong as the other disciples. If he was caught by Emperor Chenin's people, he would undoubtedly die. At this moment, hearing the news of Li Yi and seeing his descendant with his own eyes, how could Yetian not be excited? Yetian carefully observed Li Yuli's face and could vaguely see Li Ye's appearance in his eyes. Seeing that his disciple's grandson had already grown up and his strength had reached such a terrifying level, Yetian suddenly felt as if the blue sea had turned into mulberry fields, as if a lifetime had passed. More than 100 years was indeed long enough. You know my grandfather? Liu Lai saw in Yetian's reaction, and his gaze couldn't help but become strange. How could a youth from the 3,000 small worlds know his grandfather? But Nietion's reaction was definitely not an act, and he had indeed stopped she just now, as if he had seen something. Li Yi and I are old friends. Is he still well? Of course, it was impossible for Nietion to tell Li Yulai the true relationship between him and Li Yi. On one hand, he did not want to reveal his identity, and on the other hand, even if he did, Li Yulai would not believe him, so he could only say that they were old acquaintances. An old friend? Li Yulai was startled, his eyes suddenly widened, and he bellowed, "Stinking brat, you can kill me, but you can't insult my grandfather. What kind of person is my grandfather? How could he be an old friend of an ant from the lower world?" Ants? Nietion was slightly stunned, and his gaze stiffened. The martial artists of the Sumeru realm were so easily convinced that the martial artists of the lower realms were ants. He really did not know where they got their confidence from. Now that Nietion had been reborn, he didn't even have the qualifications to be old friends with his own disciple. Wasn't this a joke? "Kid, my name is Nietion. Help me pass on a message to Li Yi." Looking back at the world, Qi is like a mountain. No one could be on par with it. Tell Li Yi that this person is still alive. Nietion did not want to talk nonsense with Li Yulai. Since he was a descendant of Li Yi, even if he was a little disobedient, he would not take his life. When he saw Li Yi in the future, Li Yulai would naturally know the true identity of Nietion. Li Yulai felt the oppressive aura in Nietion's eyes, and his mind trembled slightly. When he heard what Nietion said, his eyes suddenly shrank, and he asked in surprise, "How do you know this sentence?" Looking back at the world, Qi is like a mountain. No one could be on par with it. Li Yulai often heard this sentence from Li Yi, and the latter would sigh deeply and grieve every time. Could it be that the youth in front of him was really an old friend of his grandfather? Li Yi, Li Yuli's grandfather, was a famous figure in the Sacred Light Empire and even the Sumeru world. Although he was not as invincible as the Sacred Light ancestor, he was not far from it. This was too unbelievable. How could a youth from the lower world know someone from the Sumeru world? But Nietion knew Li Ye's name, and he also said what the latter often said. There was obviously a relationship between the two. Nietion looked calmly at Li Yulai and said faintly, "On the path of martial arts, the most important thing is to have a strong mind and avoid being impetuous and arrogant. You have your current strength only because you were born in the Sumeru world. If you were from the 3,000 small worlds, your current strength would not even reach the peak of the spirit will level. The practitioners from the lower world are not ants, but they are not as lucky as you. That's all. If you can't even see this clearly, you will not go far on the path of martial arts." At this point, Nietion paused slightly, turned his eyes to Qianlong Yinghong, and said cold, "You guys go back. I will not hand over the person you want." "You really let us go?" Qianlong Yinghong was stunned. He did not expect that Nietion would not kill them. "Your Highness, let's leave quickly," Lan Huaqi, who was behind him, reminded him in a low voice. Since Nietion did not kill them, it was better to leave quickly. If Niero was not brought back, she would at most be scolded, but if Qianlong Yinghong died here, it would be troublesome. Qianlong Yinghong looked unreconciled. He looked at Nietion with hatred, and a ruthless look flashed in his eyes. Originally, he thought that this trip to the 3,000 small worlds would be very easy, and it would only take a few words at most. The practitioners from the lower world could not resist the people from the Sumeru world. But who would have thought that he would meet a weirdo like Nietion? Not only did he resist him, but he also defeated him and wanted to kill him. If Li Yuli's grandfather and Nietion did not know each other, the three of them would not have been able to return to the Sumeru world. "Your name is Nietion?" Qianlong Yinghong's figure moved, and he arrived less than 10 meters away from Nietion. He looked at the latter with a cold face and said coldly, "Humph." Tianling sneered and said, "The prince of the Holy Light Heaven Dynasty is a mess." "You." Qianlong Yinghong wanted to threaten Nietion, but he did not expect that the latter did not put him in his eyes at all. Scram! Nietion's eyes were cold, and he spat out a word. Qianlong Yinghong's face was bitter, and he could only roar in his heart, "Nietion, This prince will make you pay for today's humiliation 100 times, 1,000 times in the future. This prince will make you kneel at my feet and admit your mistakes. Nie Tian naturally knew what Qianlong Yinghong was thinking, but he could not be bothered to look at him. This kind of prince did not have much ability, and they relied on the forces behind them to show off their strength. If they encountered a true expert, they would die. Your Highness. At this time, Liu Lai came to Qianlong Yinghong's side, but he looked at Nie Tian. Although his face had eased a little, his eyes were full of unwillingness. However, considering that Nie Tian had not killed him, he thought for a while and said, Nie Tian, the girl just now is the princess of the Holy Light Heaven Dynasty. She must return to the Holy Light Heaven Dynasty. Even if we can't take her away, there will be someone stronger to take her away. I advise you not to get into trouble. Hand over the princess, and you will be a friend of the Holy Light Heaven Dynasty. If you don't hand her over, you will be an enemy of the Holy Light Heaven Dynasty. Get into trouble? Nie Tian raised the corner of his mouth and sneered. It's the Holy Light Heaven Dynasty that wants to take away the people around me. So it's the Holy Light Heaven Dynasty that wants to get into trouble. Nie Tian's voice was not loud, but it sounded so harsh and arrogant in the ears of Liu Lai and Qianlong Yinghong. It turned out that Nie Tian did not take the Holy Light Heaven Dynasty seriously at all. Chapter 724. The void shook and light flickered. Nie Tian raised his head and looked over. His eyes narrowed, and he could not help but smile bitterly. It seems that the people of the Holy Light Dynasty are determined to bring Ninth Sister back. This is going to be a little troublesome. In the void, the dazzling white light moved faster and faster, and a strong oppressive force descended. The crowd below felt suffocated, and many people could not bear the oppressive aura and directly vomited blood. What a powerful aura! The crowd looked at the dazzling white light in the void, and their eyes trembled violently. The aura of the person who came was very strong, and seemed to be even stronger than Liu Lai. The light descended, and in the dazzling space, a black figure walked out. That figure was shrouded in darkness like the night, and only a pair of black wings were exposed, releasing a terrifying aura. It's someone from the Holy Light Imperial family again. Nie Tian saw that the pair of black wings had the same aura as Qianlong Yinghong just now, but even more powerful and terrifying. Brother, Your Highness! Qianlong Yinghong, Liu Lai, and Lan Huaqi exclaimed almost at the same time. They did not expect that the Crown Prince of the Holy Light Dynasty would come in person. Crown Prince? Nie Tian's eyes narrowed, and he could not help but frown. He could feel that the person who came was far stronger than Qianlong Yinghong, and the oppressive aura was even stronger than Liu Li's. The Crown Prince's strength was definitely at the celestial being realm. Crown Prince Yingzheng. On the ground, Sun Hai seemed to suddenly realize something, and his body trembled slightly in fear. Teacher, are you all right? Jean de Bao supported Sun Hai, wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth, and said angrily, Who is this guy? He's so arrogant. He hasn't even come out, and he's already made me vomit blood. How King unreasonable. Sun Hai was startled by Jean de Bao's words, and hurriedly covered the latter's mouth, and said anxiously, De Bao, don't talk nonsense. Jean de Bao's face turned red, and he looked at the pair of black wings in the sky with a puzzled expression. Was this Crown Prince very scary? Even Sun Hai was terrified. The newcomer was called Qianlong Yinghong, the Crown Prince of the Holy Light Empire. He was known as the most monstrous genius of the Holy Light Imperial family in the past 300 years. Even in the entire Sumeru world, his talent was unparalleled. He was the leader of the 9 demons of the Sumeru world. However, although Qianlong Yinghong was a monstrous talent, he was cold-blooded, tyrannical, and bloodthirsty. He often killed people for fun. His hands were stained with blood. Even many geniuses of the Holy Light Empire had died in his hands. It was rumored that Crown Prince Yingzheng had gone into seclusion a few years ago. No one expected him to appear in the 3,000 Small Worlds. Could it be that he was also interested in the legendary 1,000-gem illusory seal? High up in the sky, The wings of the divine prison hovered in the air. Qianlong's true face was never revealed. Nie Tian's eyes narrowed slightly as he stared at the strange pair of wings in the sky with a slightly shocked expression. He could feel the extremely terrifying power contained in the black wings. It was thousands of times more powerful than Qianlong Yingjing's. This undoubtedly meant that Qianlong Yingjing had inherited far more bloodline power than Qianlong Yingjing. Nie Tian couldn't sense Qianlong Yingjing's strength, but he estimated that the latter's battle strength was not below Li Yuli's. Brother, seeing the crown prince arrive, Qianlong Yingjing stepped forward and said with a face full of excitement, "This brat is not willing to hand over her highness," and he slapped. However, before he could finish his words, a force flew through the air and a crisp slap sounded. Half of Qianlong Yingjing's face immediately swelled up. The black aura in the air condensed into a ghost face. Its black hole-like eyes swept across Qianlong Yingjing and the others coldly and scolded, "A bunch of trash." Qianlong Yingjing covered half of his face and subconsciously stepped back, not daring to make sound. Li Yulai and Lan Huaqi trembled with fear and lowered their heads. The crown prince was cold-blooded and overbearing. No one dared to disobey him. "Hand over the person." Then, the ghost face in the air turned to Nie Tian and said coldly. A violent and destructive aura spread out. Qianlong Yingjing's voice was cold, and there was no room for negotiation. He was completely ordering Nie Tian. Boom! At this time, a huge figure appeared between Nie Tian and Qianlong Yingjing. It was Di Shi. The ghost face's black eye sockets slightly widened and said cold, "You're just the soul of a demon dragon. How dare you be so arrogant in front of me? You're courting death." As soon as the word death was said, a cloud of black aura spread out in the air, covering the sky and covering the earth with billowing hostility. Roar dash! Di Shi was furious and roared at the sky. His huge body released the power of tens of thousands of thunderbolts, turning the area within a few thousand meters into a sea of thunder and lightning. The whistling dragon aura surged in the air, wreaking havoc. The endless dragon might was displayed, and the dragon race's soaring battle intent bloomed. The space was filled with the intent to kill. Boom! The next moment, the divine prison black flame and the tens of thousands of thunderbolts collided. The void began to shake violently. The two terrifying forces stirred together, causing the dark clouds to howl and the heaven and earth to wail. Sizzle. The power of thunderbolts and the power of black flames destroyed each other and penetrated each other. Endless destructive aura exploded in the void, and the space was surging with an extremely terrifying destructive aura. Waves of energy spread out and hit the ground, causing the ground to be torn apart. Nie Tian looked up at the streaks of black light and sensed the destructive power within them, which made him feel as if he were powerless to resist them. He was now at the 9th tier of the divine wheel and stood at the peak of the 3,000 small worlds. Unfortunately, such strength was still too weak in front of the warriors of the Sumeru world. He could not resist any random person from the Holy Light Empire. Strength still too weak. Nie Tian frowned and roared in his heart. If he were a heavenly emperor at this time, he would not be afraid of the crown prince. He would kill anyone from the Holy Light Empire. Unfortunately, his current strength was too weak to do so. Boom! At this moment, a violent explosion sounded in the air, and endless black light was released. It was the power of the divine prison black flame. The power of thunderbolts gradually weakened, and the power of the black flame seeped into Di Shi's body. Waves of power seemed to be tearing his body apart. Oh no! Nie Tian's heart sank, and his expression changed. Qianlong Yingjing was too strong, and Di Shi was no match for him. If the power of the black flame seeped in, Di Shi's soul body would be completely torn apart, and his soul would be destroyed. Stop! Nie Tian roared, and his figure shot up into the sky. He no longer had any scruples. The totem that covered the sky appeared and turned into a huge net that covered the sky. It was vast and boundless, and suddenly pressed down on Qianlong Yingjing. Chapter 725. In the void, a black brilliance reflected on Nietion's face. Coupled with his silver hair, he looked extremely demonic. He was fearless. The shrouding sky totem suddenly pressed forward, and starlight spread out in all directions. He had the strength of the 9th tier of the divine wheel, and the power of 90 billion stars awakened in his body. The power of the stars on the shrouding sky totem was almost completely activated. The power that suddenly erupted was unimaginable. Feeling the terrifying aura of the shrouding sky totem, the ghost face made a sound of surprise and had no choice but to give up. The divine hell wings spread out in the sky, hundreds of meters long. The power of the black flames set the prairie ablaze into a black sea of fire, filled with terrifying destructive light. Ant, since you want to die, I will fulfill your wish. The ghost face swayed, and a cold voice sounded. His empty eyes were filled with murderous intent. Qianlong Yingzheng actually felt a trace of threat from Nietion, which made him more determined to kill him. How could a warrior from the lower world let him turn the sky upside down? Want to kill me? Suddenly, Nietion's mouth curled into a strange smile, and he said coldly, "Do you have the strength to do so?" The power of the shrouding sky totem was beyond Nietion's estimation. Even if the opponent was in the celestial realm, he might not be able to break the totem. Ant, no matter how arrogant you are still an ant. The ghost face sneered, and the black flames in the sky became more violent, filling the space hundreds of meters away. Even though the shrouding sky totem made him feel uneasy, Qianlong Yingzheng still did not regard Nietion as a real opponent. The difference in strength between the two was too great. One was in the celestial realm, and the other was in the divine will realm. This was a gap that no martial arts technique or talent could make up for. Boom! The next moment, the divine hell black flames and the shrouding sky totem collided, and the two forces stirred the sky and earth. How terrifying! The crowd saw the scene in the sky, and they were shocked beyond words. Sun Hai's eyes became dull, and his whole body stiffened for more than 10 seconds before he slowly reacted. He could not imagine that Nietion actually dared to fight Qianlong Yingzheng head-on. Boom! Suddenly, there was another explosion. The power of the black flames rushed into the sky, and the destructive black brilliance surged. The starlight in the sky instantly dimmed, and the starlight net was submerged in the black brilliance. Nietion felt his mind shake, and he could not help but spit out a mouthful of blood. The heaven-shrouding totem. Even if the power of the stars on the totem was completely awakened, the totem's power could not be fully unleashed. If the heaven-shrouding totem wanted to unleash its full power, it had to rely on the power of 900 billion stars. Therefore, even though Nietion had awakened 100 billion stars, he could only display 1/9 of the power of the heaven-engulfing totem. At this moment, he had only awakened 900 star force. At most, he could only unleash 10% of the shrouding heaven totem's power. Facing a heaven-tier martial artist, the heaven-shrouding totem was still unable to contend. Nietion yelled. Seeing that Nietion was injured, Dishi let out a loud roar. His huge body wanted to rush over, but a tearing force erupted, almost completely tearing his body apart. "Back off, big brother Dishi!" Nietion bellowed as he hastily retreated. "It's too late to escape now." Qianlong saw that Nietion was injured. She rushed up, and a black figure appeared in the void. With a palm strike, the power of the black flames bloomed, and a black palm shadow blasted toward Nietion. This time, Qianlong was going all out. She wanted to kill Yi Fuqian with one blow. Nietion's eyes narrowed, and he looked at the ground. Nietion. A figure appeared in Nietion's sight and shouted his name. "Tawny." Nietion breathed a sigh of relief. He was waiting for Tawny to make a move. Once the star totem was strengthened by the Eye of the Scar of the Dusk, its power would be greatly increased. Back in the Chaos Abyss, Nietion and Tawny had worked together to stop the spiked magic scorpion. But at that time, they borrowed the power of the mountain and only stopped the spiked magic scorpion for a few seconds. But the spiked magic scorpion was a spirit beast comparable to a heavenly emperor, and Qian Longying's strength was far from being comparable to a heavenly emperor. Tawny. The crowd was stunned when they saw the figure in the sky. Wasn't she just adding to the chaos by appearing at this time? Qian Longying was very powerful. Even ancient Dragon Soul was defeated by him. If Tawny wanted to interfere, it would be no different from suicide. Tawny stood in the sky, and the eye of the scar of the dusk suddenly opened between her eyebrows. Suddenly, a blood-colored eye power surged out and surged into the totem. The totem was already shattered by the black flames, but after receiving the power of the scar of the dusk, the broken totem was instantly restored to its original state. The power of the star runes on the totem was released, turning into the power of the stars that filled the sky, covering the space of thousands of meters. Qian Longying suddenly felt a very strong pressure, and he suddenly felt a sense of suffocation. Two words suddenly appeared in his mind. Barrier. That's right. Qian Longying felt a strong barrier power that made his yuan meridians feel a strong pressure. Sky shrouding totem. At this time, Nietian also noticed something and felt the strange power of the runes on the totem, which made him very excited. Boom! Nietian controlled the sky shrouding totem and clenched his hand slightly. The huge sky shrouding net actually closed up, and a spherical space appeared, enveloping both Nietian and Qian Longying. It really is the power of a barrier. Nietian felt that the sky shrouding totem suddenly released the power of an array, causing the yuan meridians in his body to become excited, and the power of the stars in his body was greatly enhanced. At this time, Nietian suddenly understood that the power of the sky shrouding totem was not limited to what he knew. Since it could become a barrier after closing up, then as long as it could be constructed in other forms, it might be able to become an array or even a seal. At that moment, Nietian looked up at the totem above his head. It was like a sky full of stars, with countless streams of starlight converging together. Miraculous images appeared in his eyes. Sometimes 10,000 beasts were galloping, and sometimes mountains were collapsing and seas were roaring. The river of time seemed to be condensed on the totem, appearing in front of Nietian at an incredible speed. Nietian could vaguely feel that on the star shrouding totem, there were all kinds of exquisite power, arrays, seals, barriers, mysterious martial arts, and even the power of laws that he had never seen before. These huge information were stored on the totem, releasing an eternal light. Unfortunately, at this time, Nietian's understanding of the power of the stars was too shallow, and he could not perceive the huge information on the totem at all. He could only use the most basic power of the sky shrouding totem, and did not know that there was a more terrifying power hidden behind the totem. But at this time, Nietian had a deeper understanding of the sky shrouding totem, and he could feel that the power of the stars could contain all kinds of power. Chapter 726. The power of the stars, the source of power. Since the power of the stars could devour the sky, it must be able to fuse with all kinds of powers. Nietian no longer hesitated. Sword intense surged out of his body, and the brilliance of the sword flowed in the void, quickly touching the shrouding sky totem. Boom! The moment the three-sword intense touched the shrouding sky totem, a powerful formation power surged out of the totem, surging like a raging wave. The void suddenly shook, and the power of the boundary formed by the shrouding sky totem suddenly became even stronger. It really works. Nietian was shocked and overjoyed. The sword intense integrated into the shrouding sky totem indeed strengthened the power of the totem. Qian Longying, who was trapped in the shrouding sky enchantment, felt a wave of pressure invading his limbs and meridians. His 9 yuan meridians were suppressed by the endless power, causing his strength to decline rapidly. How is this possible? Qian Longying was taken aback by the sudden turn of events. His figure, hidden in the black flames of the divine prison, trembled slightly. Through the black light of destruction, he looked at Nietian with deep fear in his eyes. The totem that was originally on the verge of collapse suddenly became powerful, and in the blink of an eye, it turned into a barrier greatly suppressing his strength. Qianlong Zheng was unable to accept such a fact. What a powerful boundary power! Sun Hai, who was on the ground, felt the powerful suppression released by the shrouding sky enchantment, and his eyes trembled violently. Nietian really had many tricks up his sleeves. Even under such circumstances, he could still turn the tables and take the initiative. It was really terrifying. However, Tawny's appearance was the real turning point. Her eyes were very strange, and the blood-red power of her eyes could greatly stimulate the power of the stars, making the shrouding sky totem even more terrifying. The crowd held their breath, not daring to breathe too loudly. Their eyes were fixed on the sky, afraid that they would miss the wonderful scene. Nie Tian was in the shrouding sky enchantment, feeling the surging power of the stars, making his whole body wild with battle intent, and a mighty aura spread out 100 meters around him. The heaven-shrouding barrier has formed a space independent of the 3,000 lesser worlds. Maybe I can break through to the heaven evolution realm in this barrier. Nie Tian sensed that the sword intent around him had become even more berserk within the barrier, and his 9 key meridians had also become restless. He couldn't help but have a bold idea. In the heaven-shrouding enchantment, Qianlong Yingjing's strength was suppressed to around the 3rd tier of the heavenly evolution realm. On the other hand, Nie Tian's strength had increased to the peak of the 9th tier of the divine wheel. He only needed an opportunity to break through to the heavenly evolution realm. Sky-piercing sword. Nie Tian glanced at Tawny and knew that the latter would not be able to hold on for much longer. Without waiting any longer, he stabbed out with his sword Absolute Heaven Slash. The radiance of the sword filled the entire barrier, causing the space within a few thousand meters to tremble. A gigantic sword shadow crashed down on Qianlong like a collapsing mountain. "You want to kill me?" The black figure in the void swayed slightly, as if he was very surprised. Immediately, a ball of black flames flowed out, and the black wings became demonic. Waves of destructive aura surged out, and the space was covered in black flames. "Umph!" Nie Tianling sneered and slashed down with his sword, sparing no effort. Since Qianlong Yingjing wanted to kill him, Nie Tian had no qualms about it. Boom! In the heaven-shrouding enchantment, the two forces collided, penetrated, and devoured each other. The radiance of the sword and the light of the black flames did not give way to each other. Qianlong Yingjing's strength was suppressed to the 3rd tier of the heavenly evolution realm, the same as Qianlong Yinghong. However, the divine prison black flames in his body were obviously much stronger than the latter's. Facing Nie Tian's sword head-on, his aura was strong, and he firmly held the upper hand. Boom! With a violent sound, the light of the black flames shot up into the sky and turned into a giant black hand, blasting toward Nie Tian. Bang! Nie Tian was hit by the giant black hand, and with a dull thud, his figure was pushed back hundreds of meters, almost to the edge of the heaven-shrouding enchantment. Qianlong Yingjing was too powerful, and his divine territory black flames were even more terrifying than ordinary demonic flames. Even against a sword intent at the peak of the 3rd tier, he had the upper hand. "And it's time for you to die." Qianlong Ying was infuriated that she had been cornered by a cultivator from a lower world. She wouldn't let go of Nie Tian, even if she had to die. Her black wings grew even fiercer, and she shot out like a black arrow, stabbing towards Nie Tian with shocking sharpness. The corners of Nie Tian's mouth suddenly curled up in a strange manner. His aura suddenly skyrocketed, and the power of heaven and earth immediately changed. In the next moment, his entire body turned into a lightning vortex. In the blink of an eye, tens of thousands of lightning bolts appeared and condensed into 9 enormous lightning dragons in the sky. Each of them was hundreds of meters long, and they released a vast and terrifying lightning aura. "How is this possible?" Qianlong Yingjing exclaimed. Under the black light, his evil face was finally revealed, and he was extremely shocked and puzzled. He had clearly defeated Nie Tian, but his aura had surged, and it was several times stronger than before. How is this possible? You? Qianlong Yingzheng used his divine sense to check, and his eyes suddenly narrowed, and he was stunned for a moment. He could clearly sense that Nie Tian's strength had reached the first tier of the heavenly evolution realm. The first tier of the heavenly evolution realm was not very strong, and it was still trash in Qianlong Yingzheng's eyes. However, this kind of strength appeared in Nie Tian's body, which was extremely terrifying and simply unbelievable. Nie Tian was a martial artist from an underworld, and he was restricted by the lower plane. His strength was at most at the 9th tier of the divine wheel. How could he have broken through the divine wheel and reached the heavenly evolution realm? My God! At the same time, Sun Hai also sensed something and cried out in alarm, his face deathly pale. Nie Tian had broken through the plane's restriction. It was too terrifying. Throughout the world of martial artists, there were very, very few martial artists who could break through the plane's restriction. Those who could break through the plane's restriction were all legendary figures. However, those people had also gone through many years of seclusion, comprehended the true meaning of martial arts, or used very ordinary methods to break through the plane's restriction. But what about Nie Tian? He could casually open a boundary and then easily break through the restriction. This was too incredible. Nie Tian's talent was outrageous. At this moment, Nie Tian had a strange smile on his face, and he looked cold and evil. Although in the eyes of outsiders, it was very easy for him to break through the planar restriction, he himself knew that this was closely related to his comprehension of the power of the stars, and the most important thing was the heaven-shrouding boundary, which created a space independent of the 3,000 small worlds, which gave him the opportunity to break through. Otherwise, even if Nie Tian cultivated hard in the absorption formation made of the qi vein of the earth, he might not be able to break through the restriction. Just think about Tang Hao. He had been stuck at the 9th tier of the divine wheel for decades, and even the 1,000 tribulation ghost, I could not help him break through to the heavenly evolution realm. Chapter 7:27. The true meaning of heaven's divination was the symbol of a heavenly evolution realm warrior. When a warrior's body nurtured the true meaning of heaven's divination, their limbs and veins would undergo a qualitative change. Their martial body would become stronger, and their strength would increase by more than several times. What was even more terrifying was that a warrior who had condensed the true meaning of heaven's divination could recover in the blink of an eye as long as they were not severely injured. The improvement that the true meaning of heaven's divination brought to a warrior was a qualitative leap that was indescribable. After advancing to the heavenly evolution realm, the true meaning of heaven's divination circulated in his body. Nie Tian felt an inexhaustible power in his body that was boiling, burning, and raging. You broke through the plane's restriction. Qianlong's handsome face became shocked and frightened. He had not expected that Nie Tian would break through the plane's restriction at such a time. Indeed, his talent and strength were not enough to show off in front of Nie Tian. If Nie Tian was a warrior from the Meru world, and he, Qianlong, was a warrior from the 3,000 small worlds, Nie Tian could easily reach the celestial realm, but he could not break through the plane's restriction. Although Qianlong was a celestial realm warrior, he was still far from the peak of the Meru world. However, Nie Tian was already at the peak of the 3,000 small worlds. What was even more terrifying was that Nie Tian was still so young. His future was limitless. If such a person was given time to grow, he would definitely become a martial arts legend. Crown Prince, is it? A warrior from the Meru world? You have no right to be proud in front of me. The next moment, Nie Tian's voice was filled with strong contempt and contempt. Waves of surging sword intent wreaked havoc in the space, making Qianlong feel a deep sense of oppression. Nie Tian's strength was at the first level of heavenly evolution. With the addition of the sky-shrouding barrier, his true strength could reach the 3rd level of heavenly evolution. His true battle prowess was comparable to a 5th level of heavenly evolution martial artist. On the other hand, Qianlong's strength had been suppressed by a major realm, from the 3rd heaven evolution realm to the 3rd heaven evolution realm. His yuan meridians were also suppressed. He did not have the ability to fight Nietian head-on. Die! Nietian took a step in the void, and the burning sword intent bloomed. He fiercely chopped down with his sword. It was one of the advanced 3 moves of AO sword tactics, sword god piercing. Boom! A massive sword image appeared, condensing the sword intent within thousands of meters. Boundless power surged out like a tsunami, and a destructive aura surged in Qianlong's heart. For the first time, Qianlongying felt the pressure of death, and his heart was filled with uncontrollable despair. This kind of feeling made him very uncomfortable. It was a kind of oppression that made him wish he was dead. Qianlong's eyes widened in shock as the sword slashed down from above, and her face froze for a moment. Nietian, don't. On the ground, Sun Hai's voice rang out. If Nietian killed Qianlong Yingzheng, the entire 3,000 lesser worlds would be finished. Qianlongying was the crown prince of the Holy Light Empire. He was also the #1 prodigy of the Holy Light Imperial family in the past 300 years, and the person who would become the Holy Light Emperor in the future. If he died, the entire 3,000 lesser worlds would have to pay the price. However, Nietian had already made up his mind to kill. He resolutely and mercilessly slashed out with his sword. Just as Qianlongying was about to be reduced to ashes, a sudden change occurred. Stop! Suddenly, a mighty and deep voice rang out. Boom! Immediately after, in the air, a majestic and boundless palm energy fell, directly bombarding the sky, covering enchantment, causing a huge explosion. Crack! 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 The void shook violently, and the terrifying palm force spread out. A dazzling crack appeared on the barrier, and it instantly exploded. The entire barrier directly collapsed. Bang! Then, the mighty palm force fell on Nietian's chest, and his figure was directly hit and sent flying, drawing a dazzling line of blood in the air. Brother! The sudden scene shocked Di Shi, and he roared. Regardless of the damage to his soul and body, his huge figure rolled up and caught Nietian. Nietian! On the ground, countless voices rang out, and it was very heart-wrenching. Nietian steadied himself. His face was as pale as paper, and his body was dripping with blood. There was not a single intact skin. The strength of the person who came was too strong. With one palm, not only did he break the barrier, but he also directly injured Nietian. It was really terrifying. Brother Di Shi, I'm fine. Nietian took a deep breath, and the wounds on his body healed at a speed visible to the naked eye. Nietian was a heavenly evolution realm warrior, and he had the true will of heavenly evolution in his body. Coupled with the 9-star dragon vein body, his recovery ability was even stronger than a warrior at the peak of the heavenly evolution realm. Nietian suddenly raised his head and looked at the figure in the sky. It turned out to be an illusory old man. The person who came was actually a soul doppelganger. The palm force of a soul doppelganger was already so strong. If the original body came, how terrifying would it be? This is... At this time, Sun Hai looked at the soul doppelganger in the sky, swallowed a few times, and finally said 4 words, Holy Light Ancestor. Holy Light Ancestor. Sun Hai had never thought that even the Holy Light Ancestor would come in person for Nieyuro. He was right. The person who came was the Holy Light Ancestor. Although it was only a soul doppelganger, it was enough to shock everyone. Nietian's body shook, and the blood on his body spread. Although his face was still pale, his body had already recovered. He looked at the soul doppelganger and smiled bitterly in his heart. A warrior at the peak of the celestial being realm is really powerful. It's just a soul doppelganger, but it was able to break my barrier and seriously injure me. If the original body came in person, the consequences would be unimaginable. Ancestor. Crown Prince Yingzhen was still in a state of shock. Seeing the Holy Light Ancestor's shadow clearly, he calmed down a lot and greeted him respectfully. No matter how arrogant he was, he had to be very respectful in front of the Holy Light Ancestor. Step back, Yingzhen. The Holy Light Ancestor waved his hand slightly. His eagle-like eyes shone with a sharp light. He stared at Nyetian and murmured to himself, I can't believe he didn't die after taking a hit from me. It seemed that I really am old. The Holy Light Ancestor had used 70% of his power in that hit just now. Although most of the power was used to break the barrier, the remaining power was enough to kill a warrior in the Heavenly Evolution realm. However, Nyetian was only injured, not dead, which made him very surprised. The next moment, when he sensed Nyetian's strength, his expression suddenly froze, and he said in astonishment, Someone who broke through the plane restriction. No wonder you could take a hit from me. Nyetian looked at the Holy Light Ancestor indifferently and said to Di Shi softly, Brother Di Shi, thank you very much. You can leave now. I will take care of the rest. Okay. Di Shi agreed, and his dragon's soul body dissipated between heaven and earth. Di Shi's injuries were not light, and it would take a long time for him to recover. My young friend, can I have a word with you? The Holy Light Ancestor's eyes wandered over Nyetian's body. He seemed very friendly. Chapter 728. The Holy Light Ancestor was taken aback. He did not expect that Nyetian, a man of his status, would not appreciate it and be so cold, not giving him any face at all. You brat! How dare you talk to me like that? Qian Longying was furious and roared. Do you know that I am the top cultivator of the Sumeru world? It is a great honor for you to be here today. A great honor? Nye Tianling smiled coldly and said, I don't want this honor. Please go back. You. Qian Longying was so angry that he could not say anything. Nye Tian was a madman who feared no one. Ingzheng, step down, the Holy Light Ancestor said again, looking at Nye Tian with a serious look. Qian Longying glared at Nye Tian and stepped aside. He did not dare to disobey the Holy Light Ancestor. Nye Tian. The Holy Light Ancestor's eyes were burning with sharpness. He murmured Nye Tian's name and said, Since you want me to say it, I will not beat around the bush. The younger sister you speak of is a member of the Holy Light Imperial family. Since I am here today, this woman must return to the Holy Light Dynasty. At this point, the Holy Light Ancestor's eyes suddenly turned and locked on Sun Hai. He said, Since Mr. Sun of the Sky Soar Pavilion is also here, I will say no more. I think you know very well how powerful the Holy Light Dynasty is. Let me give you a piece of advice. Do not struggle pointlessly. Sun Hai's body suddenly stiffened. He wanted to explain, but did not say anything in the end. As soon as the Holy Light Ancestor arrived, he noticed Sun Hai at once and naturally thought that he was on Yetian's side. But that was not a big deal. If the Holy Light Ancestor vented his anger on the Sky Sword Pavilion, there would be big trouble. But even if Sun Hai tried to explain, it would be useless. Instead, it would only make things worse. Nyetian's eyes were dark and his face was cold. Now that the Holy Light Patriarch was here, it was basically impossible for him to protect Nyeyuro. After thinking for a moment, Nyetian suddenly raised his head and said coldly, My ninth sister is called Nyeyuro. Since she's a member of the Holy Light Imperial family, why was she abandoned in the 3,000 small worlds back then? This is my oversight. The great elder of Holy Light's face darkened slightly. His eyes shifted to Nyetan, and he said, If you are worried about her safety, I can assure you that as long as she returns to the Holy Light royal family, she will be the most honorable princess. I will personally guide her and protect her. I will not let any harm befall her. Nyetian stared straight at the Holy Light Great Ancestor, his eyes still calm. The Holy Light Great Ancestor would not go back on his word if he made such a promise. However, when Qian Longying heard what the Holy Light Patriarch said, she frowned and a vicious look flashed in her eyes. He sensed a threat from the Holy Light Great Ancestor's words, a threat from Nyeyuro. If the Holy Light Great Ancestor were to guide Nyeyuro personally, there might be an empress in the Holy Light Empire in the future. Nyetian was still thinking, his eyes filled with terrifying calmness. Nyetian, what else do you want? Just tell me. As long as I can do it, I will promise you. The Holy Light Great Ancestor looked at Nyetian and said calmly, 2 things. Nyetian thought for a long time and said solemnly, First, In 3 years, my ninth sister will be 14. By then, I will go to the Holy Light Empire. If she is willing to go with me, no one can stop her. If she is willing to stay, I will not force her. Okay, I promise you. Without much hesitation, the Holy Light Great Ancestor agreed to Nietion's request. Yes, Nietion nodded slightly and continued. Second, in 3 years, I will go to the Holy Light Empire to challenge someone. You? Before Nietion could finish, Qian Longying Zhang's mocking voice sounded. He looked at Nietion with disdain and said, I am not interested in accepting the challenge of a warrior from the lower world. Qian Longying Zhang was taking it for granted that Nietion wanted to challenge him, so he put on an arrogant attitude. In his view, no matter how talented Nietion was, it was impossible for him to advance to the next level in 3 years. I'm not interested in challenging you. Nietion glanced at Qian Longying Zhang and smiled cold. Then he looked at the Holy Light Great Ancestor and said calmly, The person I want to challenge is you. Me? The Holy Light Great Ancestor was stunned, and his illusory figure froze on the spot. You want to challenge the Great Ancestor? Qian Longying Zhang's reaction was even more exaggerated. He exclaimed in a shrill voice. The others were also stunned and could not react for a long time. No one could have imagined that Nietion wanted to challenge the Holy Light Great Ancestor. The Holy Light Great Ancestor was the pinnacle of the spatial world. Even if he was not the number one in the spatial world, he was at least in the top 3. Nietion was the top warrior of the 3,000 small worlds, but he was from the lower world after all. The two of them were 2 whole levels apart. They were not on the same level at all. Even if Nietion was given 3 years, he would not be able to reach the peak of the celestial being realm. Nietion was crazy. That was what everyone was thinking. But Nietion knew that 3 years was the longest time, and it was the most pessimistic prediction he had for himself. If he could not stand at the peak of the spatial world in 3 years, he would be too weak as the number 1 god of war in the heaven realm. As for the reaction of others, Nietion did not care at all. Just like when he challenged Mo 2 years ago, who would have thought that he would use only 2 years to go from an Origin Meridian Realm warrior to the peak of the 3,000 small worlds. 3 years was enough for Nietion to stand at the peak of the spatial world. In the crowd, Mo Rushi looked at the scene in the sky from afar. The current Nietion was so similar to the time when he challenged Mo 2 years ago. Back then, she believed that Nietion could defeat Mou, and now she believed that Nietion could also defeat the Holy Light Great Ancestor. Nietion, are you crazy or stupid? The Great Ancestor is the pinnacle of the spatial world. How can an ant like you challenge him? If you want to challenge him, I, Qianlong Ingzheng, will keep you company. Suddenly, Qianlong Ingzheng's voice rang out, sounding loud and harsh in the void. In his view, Nietion was not qualified to challenge the Holy Light Great Ancestor. Even if he challenged him, it would be barely enough. Challenge you. Nietion glared at Qianlong Ingzheng and sneered. If the Holy Light Great Ancestor hadn't arrived just now, you would have been a corpse. You. Qianlong Ingzheng's face suddenly turned ugly. Pointing at Tawny, he roared, If it wasn't for her, how could you have trapped me? It's unfair for the two of you to fight me alone. Shut up. Before Qianlong Ingzheng could finish, the Holy Light Great Ancestor's cold voice rang out. Haven't you embarrassed yourself enough? A dignified level 3 celestial being expert was almost killed by 2 spirit wheel experts. The Holy Light royal family has lost all face because of you. Great Ancestor, Qianlong Ingzheng looked extremely embarrassed. He wanted to say more, but when he saw the stern look in the Holy Light Great Ancestor's eyes, he didn't dare to continue. Oof. The Holy Light Great Ancestor snorted. Looking at Nietion again, he said in a deep voice, Nietion, do you really want to challenge me? The Holy Light Great Ancestor calmed down. If it was another warrior from the lower world who challenged him, he would only treat it as a joke. Chapter 729. Nietion, have you thought it through? Are you sure you want to challenge me? The Holy Light Ancestor stared at Nietion, his eyes burning with a strange light. He could sense determination and fearlessness in Nie Tian's eyes. To be able to show such determination in the face of a warrior who was far stronger than he was, it meant that Nie Tian was a man of great perseverance. With such a temperament and heaven-defying talent, Nie Tian's future was limitless. Given enough time, he would definitely become an expert who stood at the peak of the martial Tao. Nie Tian looked at the holy light ancestor straight in the eye. His eyes were firm and calm, and he nodded. He did not want to challenge the holy light ancestor on a whim. He had considered many things. First, he had to make the holy light ancestor feel pressured in order to ensure Nie Yuro's safety. Second, challenging a top cultivator was also an incentive for Nie Tian. Third, and most importantly, Nie Tian wanted to show Qianlong Yingzheng and the others that there was someone powerful behind Nie Yuro. The killing intent that had flashed across Qianlong Yingzheng's eyes just now had disappeared, but Nie Tian had sensed it clearly. Nie Yuro was Mo Rushi from 2 years ago, and Qianlong Yingzheng was Mo Yu. If he did not pressure Qianlong Yingzheng, Nie Yuro's return to the Holy Light dynasty would be extremely dangerous. Very well. The Holy Light ancestor laughed. Nie Tian, I will wait for you at the Holy Light platform in 3 years. Let's have a showdown. Hiss. Everyone gasped when they heard what the Holy Light great ancestor had said. No one had expected him to agree, and in such a serious manner at that. This undoubtedly meant that in the Holy Light ancestor's eyes, Nie Tian was qualified to challenge him. Judging from his reaction, he even saw Nie Tian as a real opponent. It was surprising that the Holy Light ancestor thought so highly of Nie Tian. Patriarch, you agreed to his challenge? Qianlong Ying stared at the Holy Light Patriarch in shock. Qianlong Yingzheng would never have believed that the Patriarch of Holy Light would take Nie Tian's challenge seriously if he hadn't seen it with his own eyes and heard it with his own ears. Patriarch Holy Light took a look at Qianlong Yingzheng and said, Yingzheng, you're talented, and you've inherited the bloodline power of the divine incarcerate black flame. But compared to Nie Tian, your talent is far inferior, and your temperament is not even a tenth of his. He didn't challenge you, not because he looks down on you, but because you are indeed not qualified to be his opponent. I dare say that there's no need for 3 years. As long as he has 2 years, or even 1 year, he will be able to reach the Deva realm. At that time, you definitely won't be his match. His words were like steel needles stabbing into Qianlong's heart. He was the crown prince of the sacred light sky dynasty, the person who would become the emperor in the future. He was the most talented genius of the Qianlong family in the past 300 years, the leader of the 9 demons of the Sumeru world. But now he was belittled. His talent was inferior, his temperament was inferior, and he was not even qualified to be an opponent of a warrior from a lower world. If these words were spoken by someone else, Qianlong Yingzheng would definitely think that it was nonsense and kill that person on the spot. However, these words came from the mouth of the Holy Light Ancestor. The Holy Light Ancestor was the person he respected the most, the person he saw as his goal. The Holy Light Ancestor's words were more important to Qianlong Yingzheng than anyone else's. At some point, Qianlong Yingzheng's eyes met Nie Tian's. The latter's indifferent expression made him feel inexplicably angry. The anger in his heart was expressed in his eyes, which became vicious and vicious. The Holy Light Ancestor's original intention was to use Nie Tian to motivate Qianlong Yingzheng, but he didn't expect that Qianlong would completely misunderstand and hate Nie Tian even more. The inner demon of martial arts. The Holy Light Ancestor caught all of Qianlong Yingzheng's reactions and let out a long sigh. On the path of martial arts, the most taboo was the inner demon. Once the inner demon was born, it would inevitably affect the martial arts heart of a warrior. At this time, Qianlong Yingzheng's inner demon was born, which was Nie Tian. If he couldn't completely defeat Nie Tian, it would be impossible to get rid of the inner demon of Qianlong Yingzheng. The Holy Light Ancestor shook his head slightly, extremely disappointed with Qianlong Yingzheng's performance. Fortunately, there was another person in the Qianlong family who had awakened the Qianlong Phantom Seal. In this way, Qianlong Yingjing's position as the crown prince was no longer necessary. The Holy Light Ancestor didn't want to pay any more attention to Qianlong Yingjing. He looked at Nie Tian and said, Nie Tian, I agree to your two requests. Now, hand over the princess of the Holy Light Empire. His voice was calm, but with an inviolable dominance. Nie Tian was a little stunned. His eyes trembled violently as he looked at Qiushan on the ground. Qiushan's figure flickered and appeared beside Nie Tian. Nie Tian took Nie Yuro. Looking at the little face that was still sleeping, his eyes couldn't help but tremble. He looked at Nie Yuro for a long time without saying anything. Nie Tian, hand over the princess to me. The Holy Light Ancestor's figure flickered and came to less than 5 meters away from Nie Tian. Wait! At this moment, a clear voice rang out. Shortly after, a massive figure appeared in the sky at an unbelievable speed. The Holy Light Ancestor frowned when he saw a spirit beast that looked like a bear not far away. On it sat a girl about 16 or 17 years old. Linger. Nie Tian turned around and saw Qiu Ling, and Xiu Guai. At this time, Guai had become Big Guai. Its body was 6 or 7 meters tall. Although it had no wings, it could stand in the air, surrounded by a faint halo. Big brother Nie Tian, I want to go with Roer. Is that okay? Qiu Ling, who said lightly, her delicate face looking stubborn. Nie Tian's eyes narrowed. Of course, he understood what Qiu Ling meant. She was worried about Roer's safety, so she chose to go with Nie Yuro. Sir, let Linger and Roer go with you, Qiushan said at this time. Nie Tian thought for a moment and nodded. If Qiu Ling went with Nie Yuro, the two of them could look after each other. It couldn't be better. At this time, Nie Tian looked at the Holy Light Ancestor and said lightly, This girl will go back to the Holy Light Empire with Ninth Sister. I want you to guarantee that her status is equal to that of a princess. Okay, I promise you. The Holy Light Ancestor looked at Qiu Ling, and agreed without hesitation. Nie Tian nodded and looked at Qianlong Yingjing. He said seriously, In 3 years, I will go to the Holy Light Empire to find them. If anything happens to either of them, I will make the Qianlong family pay in blood. Nie Tian, are you threatening the Holy Light Empire? Qianlong Yingjing roared. He was not a fool. Of course, he could tell that Nie Tian's words were directed at him. This is not a threat. This is a promise. Nie Tian glanced at Qianlong Yingjing and then at the Holy Light Ancestor. He said coldly, You are a smart man. I hope you won't do anything that will make me regret. After that, Nie Tian handed Nie Yuro to Qiu Ling, ignoring the Holy Light Ancestor's reaction. Chapter 730. Nie Tian reminded Qiu Ling, to be careful of Qianlong and Yingjing. Then, Nie Tian gave the Violet Wind Jade sword to Qiu Ling, to keep for Nie Yuro. Nie Tian had taken the sword from the Long family and was now giving it to Nie Yuro. A moment later, the Holy Light Patriarch and the others activated the space-time teleportation formation. Qiu Ling, and Nie Yuro stood in the formation and disappeared with a blinding white light. Nie Tian stood where he was and looked at the sky, speechless. Several days later, Nie Tian walked out of his room in the courtyard of the Tian Luo City Lord's residence. His figure was as sharp as a sword. After several days of hard training, Nie Tian had completely stabilized his first level of heavenly evolution. Generally speaking, after a martial artist ascended to a new level, they had to train hard. This process was very long, sometimes taking months or even years. But Nie Tian was different. He had the deepest understanding of all the levels below the Heavenly Emperor realm. Therefore, after ascending to a new level, he only needed to stabilize it. Nie Yuro woke up, but she was taken away by the Holy Light Dynasty. Nie Tian and Mo Rushi's marriage could only be put on hold. When Nie Tian arrived at the hall of the Lord's residence, Qiushan and the others had been waiting for a long time. Qiushan, how are the preparations for the vitality vein of the earth? Nie Tian asked directly. Qiushan nodded respectfully and replied, Sir, everything is ready. The location of the vitality vein of the earth has been determined, and all the materials for the formation have been transported. The Formation Master Guild has also agreed to cooperate. 12 rank 4 Formation Masters are all on standby. Very good. Nie Tian nodded in satisfaction. He looked at Sun Hai and smiled. Mr. Sun, let's go. In these few days, Nie Tian, let Xiu Shan be in charge of the vitality vein of the earth, and the latter did very well. Everything had been settled. All that was left was for Nie Tian and the others to go to Hengduan Mountain. Nie Tian led the people of the Lord's residence onto the four-winged griffin. 3 days later, the griffin landed on a high peak in the Hengduan mountain range. At this moment, there were many people gathered on the peak. Most of them were from the Tang family, the Liu family, and the Spirit Array Masters from the Spirit Array Master Guild. Yet Tian and the others dismounted from the griffin. The air was filled with dense heaven and earth spiritual energy. There was actually a layer of spiritual energy mist in the air. The heaven and earth spiritual energy here was more than 10 times denser than other places. It really is an essence chi earth vein. Nie Tian sensed the heaven and earth spiritual energy in the air and looked at the mountainous terrain around him. The corners of his mouth curled up. The heaven and earthling chi in the air was only emitted from the Yuan chi earth vein. The real heaven and earthling chi was under the ground. Just like a glacier, only a small part of it was exposed. Mr. Sun, what do you think? Nie Tian glanced at Sun Hai beside him and smiled faintly. Sun Hai's attention was not focused on the essence chi earth vein. Instead, he was looking at the peak of the mountain. There was a dark cloud gathered there. From afar, it looked like a mountain range floating in the air. Time and space have been compressed to the point of deforming. That's where the time and space boundary is. Nie Tian followed Sun Hai's gaze and was shocked. Sun Hai nodded and said, Mr. Nie, how long do you need to refine the spirit assimilation formation? Nie Tian looked at the mountain range in front of him and thought for a moment. He said, at least half a month. All right. Sun Hai agreed and said, this time and space boundary doesn't cover a large area. I can transform the boundary into a tunnel that leads to the Sumeru world. However, the entire tunnel is one way. It can only lead from the lower world to the Sumeru world. It can't lead from the Sumeru world to the lower world. That's what I want. The corners of Nie Tian's mouth twitched. He was very satisfied. As they spoke, the two arrived at the edge of the essence chi earth vein. Nie Tian. At this moment, a figure walked up and looked at Nie Tian with a gloomy expression. He called out his name in a hoarse voice. President Ji. Nie Tian smiled faintly and looked at the person in front of him. It was the president of the Spirit Array Guild, Ji Wuxiu. There was a deep hatred between Ji Wuxiu and Nie Tian. His grandson, Ji Tinghai, was killed by Nie Tian. Ji Tinghai was the hope of the Ji family's rise, but he was killed by Nie Tian. Ji Wuxiu's hatred towards Nie Tian could be imagined. The reason why the Spirit Array Guild agreed to help this time was because of the pressure from the 4 aristocratic families and the Alchemist Association. On the other hand, it was because Ji Wuxiu wanted to see what Nie Tian wanted to do. Elder Nie, are these the materials you need to refine the Spirit Array? Ji Wuxiu pointed at the spiritual materials that were piled up into a mountain and asked coldly. His eyes were filled with disdain. Not far from Nie Tian's group, there were hundreds of spiritual materials piled up into a small mountain. Most of them were grade 6 spiritual materials and were extremely precious. Ji Wuxiu didn't know where Nie Tian got so many spiritual materials from. Even the Spirit Array Guild couldn't take out so many spiritual materials at once. However, this wasn't Ji Wuxiu's focus. He was more interested in how Nie Tian was going to refine the Spirit Array. Even a top-notch spirit formation master might not be able to control hundreds of spiritual materials. In Ji Wuxiu's opinion, it was impossible to fuse so many spiritual materials together. Ji Wuxiu was the #1 Spirit Array Master in the 3,000 small worlds. The spirit arrays that he had refined only used 40 or so spiritual materials at most. Was Nie Tian joking about using hundreds of spiritual materials to refine a spirit array? The process of refining a spirit array was similar to refining a spirit pill. They both needed to refine and fuse spiritual materials or herbs. The requirements for a spirit array master to fuse hundreds of spiritual materials with different attributes were very high. If there was even the slightest mistake in the process, the spirit array would completely fail. The Tao of spirit arrays was even more complicated than Tao of alchemy. The power of the spirit array and the circulation of runes were interconnected. There was no room for negligence. The spiritual materials are simple and crude. I'm sorry to make you laugh, President Ji. Of course, Nie Tian knew what Ji Wuxiu was thinking, but he smiled faintly and deliberately provoked him. Nie Tian's mental energy had reached rank 70, which was very terrifying. However, it was impossible for him to refine the spirit assimilation formation alone, so he needed the help of other spirit array masters. Nie Tian's words made Ji Wuxiu and the spirit array masters behind him roar with laughter. There were hundreds of grade 6 spiritual materials, but Nie Tian said they were simple and crude. Wasn't this the biggest joke in the world? Nie Tian glanced at Ji Wuxiu and the spirit array masters behind him, but didn't explain anything. A few hundred spiritual materials were indeed simple and crude. In his previous life, he had seen great spirit array masters use thousands of spiritual materials to refine a spirit array. That was truly shocking. Compared to those who were at the peak of spirit arrays, Nie Tian was far inferior. Nie Tian, you boast of the heavens. I'd like to see how you're going to refine a spirit array. Ji Wuxiu smiled sinisterly, waiting to see Nie Tian make a fool of himself. The corner of Nie Tian's mouth pulled up into a cold smile, and he ignored Ji Wuxiu and the others. Teacher. At this moment, a familiar figure appeared. It was Zhang Yifeng. Chapter 731. Zhang Yifeng had won the alchemist competition at the Summer Festival and was now an honorary red-robed elder of the Alchemist Guild. He had also been cultivating on the core soul stone for a month. In less than a month, Nie Tian had Zhang Yifeng in it early. Master, I brought the dragon pattern cauldron. Zhang Yifeng took a step forward and handed it over. All right, Nie Tian smiled faintly and said, I'll be using the dragon pattern pill cauldron to forge the grand spell formation this time. I'll leave some spell formations in the dragon pattern pill cauldron for you to study. I'm sure you'll make great achievements in the Tao of spell formations in the future. Disciple thanks, Master. Zhang Yifeng was moved and bowed deeply. Ji Wuxiu and the others sneered at him, thinking that Nie Tian was bragging. It was already incredible for an 18-year-old boy to have extraordinary attainments in both martial arts and alchemy. How could he also have attainments in formations? Nie Tian ignored them. He held the dragon pattern cauldron in one hand and strode forward. A moment later, Tang Hao, Lu Jinghong, and the others appeared. Mr. Nie, the materials are ready. When will you start the formation? Lu Jinghong asked respectfully to Nie Tian. He also wanted to see exactly how grand the legendary spirit assimilation formation was. Nie Tian nodded slightly. Looking at the pile of materials in front of him, he took a deep breath and said with a plain tone, Let's start. With a leap, Nie Tian flew to the top of the mountain under countless gazes. Nie Tian raised his arm. The dragon pattern cauldron flew out and floated in the air. Everyone looked at the figure in the sky and held their breath, not daring to breathe too loudly. Nie Tian exhaled deeply. The 9 heavenly fire spell started to operate. Endless yuan qi surged out and turned into the 9 heavenly fire. Beneath the dragon mark pill cauldron, the leaf fire was surging and the heat waves were rolling. Balls of scarlet flames rose, and the space within a few hundred meters turned into a huge furnace. In this furnace, even steel would melt in an instant. Hiss! The crowd gasped when they saw this, especially the spiritual array masters and alchemists, who were dumbfounded. Directly condensing elemental energy into flames, and in such a terrifying manner at that. Nie Tian's control over flames had reached the acme of perfection. The 9 heavenly fire was also very strange. It was wild and did not dissipate. It was completely absorbed by the dragon pattern pill cauldron. It was evident that Nie Tian's flame control art was of a very high level. There were many similarities between alchemy and spiritual arrays. Nietion's attainments in the Tao of spiritual arrays were not at the peak, but his control over flames was at the peak. Not to mention these people in front of him. Even in the Heaven Realm's God Realm, Nietion's fire control technique could be ranked in the top 10. A moment later, the Dragon Mark Pill Cauldron became scorching hot. The rolling flames soared tens of meters into the sky, incomparably gorgeous. Nietion formed hand seals with one hand, controlling the flames to condense without dissipating, following which the power of lightning surged out, and the flames in the air actually slowly transformed into a fire dragon, surging with the power of lightning. So terrifying. When the crowd of spiritual array masters saw this scene, they were all astonished and exclaimed out loud. Nietion was too terrifying. He could actually mix the power of another attribute into the flames and perfectly fuse the two types of power. It was really strange. Sun Hai was also stunned by the sight. He stared blankly for a long time, unable to say a word. He had only seen such a superb fire control technique from Shumi World's #1 alchemist. Who exactly was Nietion? How could he be so terrifying? Nietion stood tall in the air, the power of lightning surging around his body. The flames circled around his body, but they could not harm him in the slightest. He maintained the lightning fire dragon, following which the fire dragon spat out 12 bolts of lightning fire, landing in 12 directions around the Dragon Mark Pill Cauldron. 12 fourth-rank spiritual array masters, please stand in the direction of the flames. The spiritual absorption array is about to open. Nietion's mighty voice sounded, following which countless flames surged, as if they had a life of their own, madly growing in different directions. A moment later, the lightning fire formed the outline of the array, and a weak but powerful array power spread out. Everyone felt their minds shake, and they all retreated hundreds of meters away. The 12 spiritual array masters looked at each other, their eyes flashing with sharp light. They could feel the grandeur of the spiritual absorption array. Being able to participate in the creation of such a spiritual array would be of great help to their understanding of the Tao of spiritual arrays. The 12 figures immediately split up and appeared in 12 directions. Nietion nodded heavily. He raised his arm, and hundreds of spiritual materials floated up at the same time. Nietion closed his eyes. His divine sense was like an invisible giant hand, sensing the attributes of each spiritual material. Then, he divided them into 12 portions and sent them to the 12 spiritual array masters. Start refining the spiritual materials. Nietion suddenly opened his eyes and shouted in a deep voice. Yes. The 12 spiritual array masters answered in unison. They all took out their pill cauldrons. Flames rose, and the spiritual materials entered the cauldrons. Waves of spiritual energy floated in the air. Ji Wuxiu was dumbfounded. He couldn't believe that someone could create a spiritual array like this. He looked at Nietion, and the resentment in his eyes gradually turned into infatuation, respect, and admiration. Nietion stood in midair, and the origin energy around him surged to maintain the operation of the spiritual array. A few hours later, the 12 spiritual array masters successfully refined the first batch of spiritual materials. 12 balls of spiritual liquid appeared in the air. They were crystal clear, and spiritual energy shot into the sky. Nietion opened his slightly closed eyes. Flames surged out of his body and turned into a giant hand. He swept the 12 balls of spiritual liquid into the flames. And what is he doing? Seeing this, Sun Hai, Ji Wuxiu, and the others' eyes suddenly widened, and their faces were full of disbelief. Those were 12 balls of spiritual liquid with different attributes. Nietion was collecting them at the same time. Was he going to merge them all together? The spiritual liquid had different attributes, and their powers countered each other. If they were forcefully merged, something big would happen. This was the most basic knowledge. Didn't Nietion know? Sun Hai and Ji Wuxiu's eyes were wide open, and they didn't even dare to breathe. Nietion controlled the 12 balls of spiritual liquid and merged them all into the body of the lightning and fire dragons. Power of the stars go, Nietion murmured in his heart. The realm zone origin array in his body activated, and a majestic power of the stars flowed into the lightning and fire dragons. Then, the power of the stars on Nietion's body exploded. Strands of power surrounded the lightning and fire dragons and turned into star soul flames. Boom! 12 balls of spiritual liquid, 12 different powers, collided with each other. The lightning and fire dragons became furious, and the flames went wild, shooting into a fire pillar that was dozens of meters tall. Danger! The crowd's eyes trembled, and they shouted in unison. 12 different powers collided with each other. It was terrifying. Almost at the same time, the star soul flames around the lightning and fire dragons formed layers of shields. The power of the stars merged into the violent flames, and the flames gradually stabilized. A moment later, the 12 balls of spiritual liquid slowly merged into one and became a ball of fiery red spiritual liquid, surging with a rich spiritual aura. Ho! Nietion let out a long breath and wiped the beads of sweat off his forehead. He raised his arm, and the ball of fiery red spiritual liquid turned into a ray of red light and entered the flames of the spiritual array. Suddenly, a powerful aura of the spiritual array spread out, and it spread out for thousands of meters. Nietion successfully merged the 12 balls of spiritual liquid and turned them into the power of the spiritual array. The whole process was smooth, and there was not the slightest bit of delay. Chapter 732. Sun Hai, Ji Wuxiu, and the other spirit array masters looked at the figure in the sky with shock and admiration. Especially Sun Hai. His view of Nietion changed once again. He had seen many spirit array masters, alchemy masters, and blacksmithing masters, but in terms of proficiency in flame control, there was no one else in the entire Shumi world who could reach Nietion's level. The shock that Nietion brought to Sun Hai was too great. The ability that a youth displayed surpassed those old monsters who had cultivated for hundreds of years. It was really incredible. Nietion stood in the sky with a calm expression, but he let out a long sigh of relief. Nietion took a huge risk to merge 12 different types of spirit liquids at once. He first used the devouring power of the stars to weaken the conflict between the 12 types of spirit liquids, and then successfully merged them. The power of the stars far exceeded Nietion's imagination. He vaguely felt that as long as the power of the stars in his body was awakened enough, he could even change the attributes of some spirit materials and herbs. The power of the stars in Nietion's body was still too little, and it could only help him merge different types of spirit liquids. But this was enough for Nietion to complete the refinement of the spirit assimilation array. Nietion released the origin energy in his body, condensing thunder and flames to build the structure of the array, and then refined the spirit materials to support the array. Next, the 12 spirit array masters continued to refine the spirit materials, and Nietion merged the refined spirit liquids together and injected them into the spirit array. The spirit liquids merged into the spirit array, and the rune power of the array became more and more stable. The majestic power of the array circulated in the sky, spreading out for thousands of meters. In the blink of an eye, half a month passed. The moon shone in the sky, and the stars shone brightly. The spirit assimilation array had been refined for half a month, and hundreds of spirit materials had been refined. At this moment, the crowd looked nervously at the figure in the sky, holding their breaths, and their eyes trembled, not daring to make sound. The scale of the spirit assimilation array was complete. The surging power of the array spread out to a distance of 10,000 meters. The entire array looked like a mountain formed from flames. Not only did the power of lightning surge within it, but there was also starlight flowing within it. Nietion had integrated the power of lightning and the power of stars into the spiritual absorption array, making the entire array more stable. In the void, Nietion's figure stood in the middle of the formation, the runic power of the formation circulating around his body. Next, It was the most crucial time to activate the array. The spiritual array had been completed, and whether or not it could be used depended on whether or not it could be successfully activated. Nyetian closed his eyes and sensed the aura of the spiritual array carefully and slowly. 2 balls of scarlet liquid floated above his hands, releasing a dense and violent energy. This was the spiritual liquid needed to activate the spirit assimilation array. It was refined from the 1,000-year-old Fusang wood and contained a strong wood attribute energy, which could trigger the first operation of the spirit assimilation array. The spirit assimilation array was very important to Nyetian. As long as the array could be successfully activated, it could absorb the heaven and earth spiritual energy contained in the Yuanqi earth vein. At that time, the heaven and earth spiritual energy within the array would be at least 1,000 times richer than the outside world. Cultivating in the array for a day was equivalent to cultivating in the outside world for a year or even several years. Everyone around him, including Mo Rushi, Qiu Shan, Zhang Yifeng, and the others, could all enter the spirit assimilation array. As long as the spirit assimilation array could be maintained for a month or even half a month, Mo Rushi and the others could easily advance to the peak of the divine wheel realm. Cultivating in the spirit assimilation array for a month was equivalent to dozens of years of hard work for ordinary warriors. A moment later, Nyetian sensed an exquisite connection point of the spirit assimilation array. His eyes suddenly opened, and he raised his hand slightly. 2 balls of scarlet spiritual liquid began to circulate in the air. Rays of dazzling light surged, making people feel as if they were in a dream. Slowly, under the watchful eyes of countless people, the scarlet spiritual liquid dissipated in the air and turned into a dazzling light that flowed into the spirit assimilation array. Boom! In the next moment, the spirit assimilation array suddenly shook, and the light it emitted was so bright that it even overshadowed the moonlight. The entire spirit assimilation array reacted and began to operate. Endless array aura gushed out, and the power of the array immediately filled the air. In the invisible space, the light from the spirit assimilation array slowly extended into the sky, like a giant tree full of vitality growing towards the sky. How terrifying! The crowd stared at the strange scene in the sky, their eyes trembling and their hearts filled with worship. Nyetian must have some kind of heaven-defying and earth-shattering means to activate such a huge spiritual formation in a split second. At this time, Nyetian was inside the spirit assimilation array, and his forehead was covered in beads of sweat. When the spirit assimilation array began to operate, he didn't relax at all. Instead, he became even more nervous. In the next moment, Nyetian's aura skyrocketed, and the 9 heavens flame technique in his body operated crazily. Pure flames were released, and they instantly turned into a scarlet light that surged into the spirit assimilation array. After a while, the spirit assimilation array was completely stabilized, and the light released by the spirit assimilation array skyrocketed into the endless night sky. This is amazing! The crowd was shocked. They had never seen such a scene in their lives. Ji Wuxiu and the other spirit assimilation array masters were intoxicated, and the shock in their hearts could no longer be described with words. They suddenly felt that in front of Nyetian, their little attainments in spirit assimilation array masters were completely insignificant. It's done. Nyetian suddenly raised his head and felt the power of the spirit assimilation array around him. The corner of his mouth curled into a smile, and he said faintly, "Spirit assimilation array, start operating. Roar! Roar!" As soon as Nyetian finished speaking, 2 intense dragon roars resounded through the heavens and the earth. Boom! Boom! In the next moment, 2 enormous figures shot out from the spirit assimilation array into the sky with a terrifying aura. The spirit assimilation array was activated, and 2 dragons shocked the sky. The 2 dragons were completely formed by flames, and their bodies were enormous, stretching for tens of thousands of meters. The power of thunder and stars flowed on the dragons, which was shocking to the world. The crowd on the ground was completely stunned. Their hearts trembled violently, and their eyes became blurred. The scene of two dragons shocking the sky was too shocking. Looking at the two dragons soaring into the sky, Nyation let out a long sigh of relief. He reached out his hand and touched his forehead, which was covered with sweat. The spirit assimilation array was finally activated, and it began to operate. The two fire dragons circled around the spirit assimilation array, protecting it. Nyation moved and landed on the ground with the dragon pattern elixir cauldron. For the past half a month, he had maintained a high level of mental tension. Now that he suddenly relaxed, he was about to collapse. "Master!" Zhang Yifeng walked over, looking excited. Nyation smiled faintly and returned the dragon pattern elixir cauldron to Zhang Yifeng and said, "Yifeng, I've left the spirit assimilation array in the cauldron. Concentrate on comprehending it." "Yes, I won't let you down." Zhang Yifeng took the cauldron and felt the aura of the spirit assimilation array in it. He was very excited.